Chapter 1333. Fan Jia tightened her grip when she saw the report. This was the first time she felt like she couldn't control the situation. She had assumed that even with Z around, she wouldn't be able to control the hearts of others. After all, she knew better than them how they thought. She hadn't expected someone to step forward. Fan Jia's eyes dimmed, but there was nothing she could do. She had wanted to approach them from the perspective of a fan and then poach them. Who would have thought that in the end she would only be able to pry away a few scattered people? They weren't going to be of any use. After all, Feng Yi wasn't a pushover, he would definitely control the public relations. Fan Jia realized that her plan might fail and started to panic. At this moment, Bo Jiu made her move. When it was time to contact young Master Tang, she wouldn't hold back. Of course, she couldn't make such a call in front of others. She found an excuse to enter the washroom. After closing the door, the call went through. She didn't say anything unnecessary, just one sentence. Fan Jia is in Jiang City. She was last seen in the old alley of the Great Wall Street. There are many inns and internet cafes there, but similarly, there are many surveillance cameras. The person on the other end laughed. Are you only going to tell me Fan Jia's location? Aren't you going to tell me your location? Or rather, where are you hiding Chinemo? It isn't difficult for us to find him since you have to participate in the competition. That's true. Why don't you let young Master Tang handle the matter and allow the Almighty to participate in the competition? You can capture him. What do you think? Bo Jiu arched a brow, her fingers tapping on the phone as though she was negotiating. Z, do you think I don't know what you are up to? Didn't you already know that we wouldn't capture him in public? That's why you brought him to Jiang City. It is indeed troublesome to capture Chinemo since we have to think of an excuse. But no matter what, it won't be able to convince the masses. When young Master Tang said these words, he tugged on his tie. The latter part was what I said during the meeting. It's always difficult to persuade those people. Bo Jiu replied calmly, Young Master Tang, you are being humble. This level of deception should be a piece of cake for you. The person on the other end of the line didn't reply. Instead, he changed his tone and said slowly, as long as you can ensure that Chinemo doesn't do anything, we won't do anything. If he shows any signs, you have to be prepared. My boyfriend is busy dating me every day. He doesn't have time to do anything else. Bo Jiu replied casually, but she was well aware of the situation. If you guys can't catch him, I don't mind doing it myself. You? You want to commit a crime? Z, this is China, not the Fifth Avenue. Are you here to capture or kill? Focus on your competition. We'll take care of everything else. Being obedient isn't for your own good, it's for your family's good. You should understand what I'm saying. Of course Bo Jiu understood. That was why she hadn't launched a large-scale attack to track Fan Jia down. During the probation period, whatever she did would be blamed on the Almighty, so she couldn't do it. If everything goes according to plan, we should be able to find him tonight. These were young Master Tang's last words. This person always did what he said. Since he said it was night, it wouldn't be past midnight. Bo Jiu relaxed. The moment she hung up, she received another call. Was Feng Yi? Bo Jiu pressed the answer button. A voice came from the other side. It seemed to be somewhere else, and the background noise was a little noisy. Tell those bastards not to worry. With just a few words, Bo Jiu smiled. The committee has agreed? MMH. Even though he was tired, he wanted to share his joy with someone. But the committee still needs to see how good he is. If he's still top-notch, the name list will remain the same. Bo Jiu arched a brow. What do you think? It's too late for a match, isn't it? I sent the footage of your training yesterday to the committee. They're looking for someone to analyze it. Feng Yi paused. Let's wait a little longer, the results will be out soon. A chance is better than no chance at all. All right. Bo Jiu's eyes lit up. Feng Yi was right, there was still a chance, at this moment. Within the committee, a person led the three Almighties from Xiangnan into the room. The person at the front was Xiangnan's captain, Xiao Jing. Goddess Luo stood on the left while Zhao Sanpang stood on the right. Honestly, it was such a sensitive time for the committee to invite him. Zhao Sanpang was still a little apprehensive. The person sitting in the middle of the meeting smiled. Sit, don't stand. I called you here because we need you to complete a task with us. Task? Zhao Sanpang turned his head to look at his captain with a dumbfounded face. There wasn't a single ripple in his emotions. With such a comparison, he felt that he was making a fuss out of nothing. Zhao Sanpang told himself to calm down, otherwise, it would damage his divinity. But before he could adjust his sitting posture, a video appeared on the big screen. They had been hearing about the ID in the video frequently. After all, a certain someone was flaunting their love. It was infuriating. Qin Mo is currently using this account. As he spoke, his gaze landed on their faces. I believe all of you have heard about the exposure on the internet. It is undeniable that Qin Mo is an outstanding esports player, but now that he has lost his memory, we can't decide if he is still suitable for the Asian Cup. The video was taken from the internet and the data is reliable. Take a look and analyze it from a technical point of view. What do you think of Qin Mo's current standards? Zhao Sanpeng glared. Why did Xiangnan have to do such a thankless job? Before he could speak, his wrist was pressed down. Beauty Luo smiled, gesturing for him to tilt his head. That was when Zhao Sanpeng realized that his captain had started to observe the movements of the character in the video. The other members of the committee were watching as well. Since they were in this industry, they had a certain level of understanding. There were even retired players amongst them. But the ones who truly understood were Xiangnan. After all, they had been the national champions for 3 consecutive years. That wasn't all, they had even been the runner-up in the Asian Cup. It was more suitable for them to provide their opinions on technical aspects. The video wasn't short. It wasn't just one match but 3 consecutive matches. After it ended. Chapter 1334. I don't think Qin Mo is suitable for the Asian Cup. Forget about his amnesia. Even with the injury on his hand, he is bound to make mistakes in the competition. There are too many unpredictable factors in the competition. With his amnesia, he isn't as good as he used to be. He won't be able to create any miracles. Even though it's a pity, I personally admire Qin Mo. But considering the big picture, I will vote against him, the person said resolutely. The people sitting next to him seemed to be discussing and considering his suggestion. At this moment, Xiao Jing spoke up. Memberly is right, Qin Mo isn't as good as he used to be, but his improvement is far greater than anyone else's. From knowing nothing about the game to a 1v1 duel, he only used 1 round. After that, he didn't lose any of the subsequent rounds. Furthermore, the heroes he controlled were different. At the start of every match, he seemed to be understanding his character's skills. After 3 minutes, he would be able to learn them and even kill with a backhand. In the middle lane, he played as a sorcerer. It seemed casual, but every move he made was predictive. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been caught by the assassin. If anyone were to pay attention to his statistics, they would know that even though his score isn't the highest, his participation rate is 100%. These matches might seem to be controlled by the assassin, but in reality, no matter which character he plays, he is the one leading the rhythm. Furthermore, he wins every match. This game might not be difficult for professional players, but not all professional players are able to win every match. This is because other than himself, the other 4 teammates aren't controllable. If he wants to win, he has to control these factors and control the rhythm. Not only does he have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of his teammates, he has to be able to guess the positions of his opponents. At the very least, he has to achieve these 2 points. I won't talk about positioning and maneuvering because there are people here who don't play games. I just want to ask who can do it. His voice was calm. This caused the resolute man to hesitate. Xiao Jing glanced at him. In the game, no one is more talented than Qin Mo. Even after so many years, I don't want to admit it, but it is a fact. Besides, he might have forgotten some things, but his body still remembers them. There is one thing that I don't agree with committee member Li because he is my opponent. Objectively speaking, Xiangnan is stronger than Supreme Alliance, but these people will always shatter my understanding. Supreme Alliance is a team that can never be judged from a 1-minute perspective because they will grow stronger with their opponents, and that is even more true for their captain. Mr. Li said that he couldn't create any miracles, but I didn't think so. After all, many people thought that he couldn't stop me, Fat Tai and Luo Luo all by himself. But in the end, he fought 1 against 3, and with a sliver of his health, he broke through the crystal and ignited the whole of China's esports. At that time, no one thought highly of him, just like now. Committee member Li didn't say anything else. He swallowed all the words he wanted to say and rubbed his forehead. He put down his pen and seemed to be thinking. The conference room was silent. Seeing the situation, the person in the middle scanned the room. Now you should have your own thoughts. Let's vote, raise your hand if you agree. Xiao Jing was the first to raise his hand. Fatty and the others naturally followed. As for the others, regardless of what Xiao Jing said, they felt that it was safer to be conservative. In their position, they didn't wish to be meritorious. If Qin Mo really participated and anything happened during the competition, they would have to bear the responsibility. On the other hand, if Qin Mo didn't participate, at least there wouldn't be any accidents. For the first time, Fatty found it hard to breathe when he saw this. He didn't understand the meaning of calling them over. Only the 3 of them raised their hands, the others didn't seem to have any intention of agreeing. Just when Xiao Jing was about to put down his raised hand and leave, a voice suddenly rang out. Committee member Li seemed to have made a decision as he raised his hand. The two people sitting on his left and right also moved in the next second. Fatty's eyes started to waver in surprise. I was there for the competition, Xiao Jing mentioned. Committee member Li smiled. At that time, everyone stood up and applauded as though they were using up all their emotions. It would be a pity if a contestant like Qin Mo was stopped. Hearing this, Xiao Jing's eyes lit up and he only said 2 words, "Thank you." Just like that, the 3 votes became 6. Qin Mo was saved. When it was time to leave, someone called out to Xiao Jing. "Captain Xiao, you are so smart, why can't you understand today's meeting? Why are you still speaking up for Qin Mo? If you didn't say anything, someone would have suggested for you to join Supreme Alliance temporarily and return to another team after the Asian Cup. It isn't impossible since it is for the greater good. Committee member Zhang, you seem to have misunderstood." Xiao Jing's voice was emotionless. "I'm just speaking from a technical standpoint. If Qin Mo is too weak, I would vote against him directly. Besides, the good and bad of every team depends on the team members' respect for their captain. For a team like Supreme Alliance, they wouldn't think that I can replace Qin Mo. Similarly, the people from Xiangnan wouldn't let me leave either. Considering the bigger picture, it's better to leave more choices to the participating members. If emotions are present, they might not be able to perform well in the Asian Cup." With that, Xiao Jing walked into the elevator with Fatty and Luoluo. Left behind, committee member Zhang almost laughed out of anger. What was wrong with these lousy gamers? Did they think that just because esports was popular they could be like other athletes? At the end of the day they were just fooling around. Just because they had fans they were so arrogant. Sooner or later they would fall. His words weren't pleasant to the ears. His voice could be heard through the cracks of the elevator. Zhao Sanpang wanted to press the elevator button and rush out to reason with him. Xiao Jing reached out to stop him. "Is there a need?" Zhao Sanpang was infuriated. What nonsense is he saying? Didn't many people say that winning or losing isn't important? Since we are just playing a game, it doesn't matter if we lose. Xiao Jing glanced over. At this moment we just have to win. He didn't need to say anything. As long as they won they would be able to bring glory to the country. Only then would they be acknowledged by more people. Those people probably had the same thoughts. Xiao Jing's gaze landed on the white wall of Supreme Alliance's promotional video outside the elevator. He believed that one day people would understand that they weren't just playing a lousy game. They were playing in a league and their event was called esports. Outside the building, Feng Yi was still waiting for news. His phone rang. He didn't pause for a moment. After receiving the news, he turned to call Bo Jio. His phone rang. He didn't pause for a moment. After receiving the news, he turned to call Bo Jio. His phone rang. He didn't pause for a moment. After receiving the news, he turned to call Bo Jio. But there was one thing, the person she wanted to inform wasn't in the computer room. The other members were all there. When Lin Feng heard the decision of the committee, he leaped up from his chair and gave her a bear hug. He asked excitedly, "Really? Little Spade, is what you said true? You can take a look at your phone, old Fox Feng has sent a message." As expected, there was a group message. Lin Feng was overjoyed. He was so happy. After he was done, he seemed to have thought of something, his back stiffening. He glanced towards Qin Mo's seat instinctively. When he realized there wasn't anyone there, he heaved a huge sigh of relief. Fortunately, his actions weren't seen by his captain. Everyone was happy but their expressions were different. Bo Jio found the most reliable Rao Rong and asked, "Where did Brother Mo go?" "He probably went to the washroom." Rao Rong wasn't sure. Washroom? There hadn't been anyone there when she had arrived. At this moment, Feng Shang spoke up, Captain seems to have gone out to buy candies." "Buy candies?" No one believed that such a thing could happen. How could their captain buy candies? Bo Jio's fingers paused slightly before she headed downstairs. But just 3 minutes ago, outside the apartment at a 24-hour convenience store at the entrance of the estate. She hadn't expected to be so lucky. She had planned to make her move at night. However, she hadn't expected to see that unexpected person. Fanjia's eyes widened. He had one hand in his pocket, the other on the shelf. He seemed to be choosing something. His face wasn't any different from how she remembered, but now, he looked like a devil who had been freed. From the curve of his lips, she could sense a different evil aura. Very quickly, Fanjia realized that this was the best opportunity to make her move. Because there was no one else beside him except himself. Besides, standing in front of the same shelf in the convenience store wouldn't arouse any suspicion. After making up her mind, Fan Jia suppressed her emotions and strode over to the tall figure. She heard a faint sound. That guy probably likes to eat this brand. The man's finger landed on one of the candies. Fan Jia hadn't expected him to buy candies. With his words, she knew who he was referring to. Intense jealousy made Fan Jia clench her fists tightly, her fingertips digging into her palms. Just as she was about to speak, a loud sound rang out. Swoosh. A poker card flew straight towards her face. Fan Jia dodged immediately, watching as the card stabbed into the bread behind her like a knife. Her face paled and she trembled. Brother Imo, don't you recognize me? Brother Imo? When Qin Imo heard this word coming from someone else's mouth, he realized a problem. He didn't like it. Fan Jia had wanted to make use of his amnesia to get close to him, but the moment she said that, the man took a packet of candies and was about to pay the bill. He didn't even look at her. Fan Jia narrowed her eyes, blocking Qin Mo's path. Brother Imo, do you really think that person likes you? She just wants you to participate in the Asian Cup, that's why she listens to you. If you don't believe me, I have pictures here. She has a close relationship with Hoshino. It isn't as simple as mutual admiration, they have always been close friends. Back then, in order to clear Hoshino's name, she didn't hesitate to lie to you. Have you forgotten all that? Fan Jia narrowed her eyes, blocking his way. Brother Imo, do you really think that person likes you? That was what Fan Jia thought he would say. He would at least say a word to her. Unexpectedly, he only gave her one word, a chill in his laziness. Scram. Fan Jia froze on the spot. There wasn't a hint of warmth in his gaze, as though he would kill her if she said another word. It seemed like she shouldn't have used such a method. Since she couldn't have him, no one else could. Fan Jia's eyes dimmed. Qin Imo, stop lying to yourself. The most important person to you is dead. It's all because you didn't catch her. You must still remember that bottomless abyss. Qin Imo didn't intend to listen to her anymore. But those words seemed to seep into his brain through his eardrums. He understood the hint and wanted to avoid it. But when he heard that sentence, the most important person to you is dead. It's all because you didn't catch her. The intense pain made him press down on his head. She fell deeper and deeper. By the time you realized it, it was already too late. When she needed you, you were already saving someone else. Fan Jia continued, walking towards her step by step like a snake spitting out its tongue. She fell deeper and deeper. By the time you realized it, it was already too late. Something seemed to break in his brain. Qin Mo's gaze wasn't as sharp as before. Instead, the color gradually faded. He seemed to be looking at something, but at the same time, it seemed like he couldn't see anything. He stretched his hand out to grab something. But all he caught was air. Fan Jia intentionally dodged, looking at him from the side. She continued slowly, you know better than anyone else that you are the one at fault. If you had listened to her and ignored others, tossing aside your so-called responsibility, she wouldn't have died. Pitiful Z, not only was she not accepted by the world, she would also sink into the abyss forever. You saw how she struggled to get up. When she was young, you promised her that when you grew up, no matter what you did, she would be the first. You were the one who went back on your word, you caused her death. When Fan Jia said the last sentence, Qin Mo's eyes widened. Qin Mo's eyes were completely blank. He raised his hand again. This time it was even more intense than before. It was so intense that even his knuckles turned white. It was fragile yet tough. Back then, it was this tenacity that caused her brother to fail time and time again. She clenched her fists. This time she didn't avoid him. Instead, she reached out to hold his hand. Chapter 1335. The smile on Fan Jia's face froze. That was because she hadn't expected that he wouldn't grab her hand. Instead, he raised his hand and grabbed the red string around his neck. The red string was very thin. If one didn't look closely, they wouldn't be able to tell that there was an amulet tied to the other end. Fan Jia gritted her teeth when she saw this. She couldn't accept that at this stage he was still thinking about Z, who should have died a long time ago. The hypnosis wouldn't fail. When he had been in the Golden Triangle, he had seen the video that they had purposely played for him. Moreover, the environment by the lake and his amnesia. All these signs showed that he had been affected. Otherwise he wouldn't have lost his memory. Now that she was doing a deep hypnosis, it was impossible for him not to break down. Fan Jia looked at the pair of dazed eyes and lowered her voice. Brother Imo, it's me. You. Qin Mo's eyes moved down slowly. Fan Jia seemed to have seen hope, her eyes lighting up. That's right, it's me. Z, have you forgotten? You have been looking for me. I haven't forgotten. Qin Mo released the amulet and smiled at Fan Jia. I have been looking for you. Fan Jia knew she had succeeded. In his subconscious he had treated her as Z. Back when she had approached him, she had wanted to use Z's identity because at that time, they had realized that Qin Mo's treatment of Z wasn't his usual style. But at that time he had been too flawless. Even though they had obtained a lot of information, she had only appeared by his side for 3 days. She hadn't done anything and he had exposed her. He had even dug out information about the organization from her. Fan Jia hadn't forgotten about this. She had thought that the best chance to become his lover hadn't been fulfilled. This time it was different. He had a weakness that could be overcome and it was a fatal one. Since he wasn't willing to admit that that person had left, she would replace that person. Fan Jia didn't care. Anyway, she had become the most important person in his heart. Let's go, Brother Mo? Fan Jia smiled lightly. Qin Mo arched a brow. Where? A place without anyone else. Fan Jia glanced to the side. It's too noisy here. Qin Mo didn't object. He didn't know why, but there seemed to be a voice in his ears telling him that this person was very important. It wouldn't be wrong to listen to her. When he nodded, Fan Jia's smile deepened. She reached out to grab his wrist. But what she grasped was indeed a piece of air. Fan Jia frowned. Brother Mo, Qin Mo didn't know why he dodged. It seemed like a natural reaction. Fan Jia tried again. This time she wanted to hold on to him. But the result was the same. Fan Jia inhaled deeply, looking extremely understanding. It's fine, I know you aren't used to people approaching you, including me. Let's head back to our place first. We'll leave the country tomorrow or the day after. All right. Qin Mo's agreement boosted her confidence. It seemed that it was only a matter of time. After a long time he wouldn't reject her like he did now. Chapter 1336. MH. Even though the answer was cold, Fan Jia could see her life-saving talisman. But in that word, Fan Jia could see her life-saving talisman. As long as he was around, the police wouldn't be able to find them. Fan Jia didn't dare to stay any longer and urged Qin Mo to leave. But Qin Mo was still standing there. Fan Jia followed his gaze. It was the box of sweets. Her eyes were filled with jealousy. Brother Mo, if you don't leave with me I'll be in danger. Do you want to see me die again? Her words were like needles stabbing into Qin Mo's mind. He suddenly turned his head, following behind Fan Jia as they exited the convenience store. At this moment, Fan Jia only wanted to leave. She hurriedly hailed a cab by the roadside. After opening the door, she gave the driver an address and swiftly shut the windows, as though she didn't want Qin Mo to look outside. Right at this moment, Bojio walked towards the convenience store. She couldn't see the speeding cab across the street. Of course, the person in the cab wouldn't be able to see her from so far away. Bojio walked into the convenience store. She scanned her surroundings but didn't see the Almighty. He couldn't have gone back. If he did, she would definitely bump into him. But where did he go? Bojio frowned. She pondered for a moment before walking towards the employee. She reached out to hold the box, her lips lifting slightly. Hello, I have a question. Oh, thank you. The employee blushed and thanked her. Then she fell into a daze, wondering how lucky she was to meet so many hunks today. Bojio saw that the girl was in a daze and wanted to repeat her question. I want to ask, did you see a tall guy wearing a black trench coat just now? He doesn't like to talk and is very handsome. He's here to buy sweets? Handsome? The employee didn't even have time to think before she blurted out, I saw him. Just now he was still standing there. Then, a mysterious girl came and said something to him. Then he left with that person. Girl? Bojio paused. The Almighty couldn't possibly know any girls. She thought for a moment and asked again, Are you sure this person is the same person as the one I described? Of course. The employee's eyes lit up. That man is too handsome. It's hard to forget him. We were wondering if he was a celebrity. He was indeed the Almighty. But why would he leave with a girl? Suddenly, something seemed to have jumped in. Bojio's eyes widened, her fingers trembling. She reached out and grabbed the employee's shoulder. You must have surveillance cameras here, right? Can I have a look at the surveillance footage? This? The employee was in a difficult position. You have to ask our store manager. Bojio panicked for the first time. Where's your manager? I think he's in the shop next door. How about this, I'll call him and ask. The shop assistant was still very enthusiastic. After all, this little handsome guy looked very anxious. He turned his head and was about to reach for his phone. But what she didn't expect was, the other party did not give her the time to do so. Just as she turned her head away, a voice suddenly rang out. Chapter 1337. Mr. What are you doing? This is our cashier counter, you can't enter as you please. The cashier was clearly frightened. How could anyone other than the staff touch the computer in the convenience store? But the pressure on her shoulders was too strong, she couldn't break free. The handsome youngster just said, "Sorry?" The other hand took over her mouse. She watched as the hand moved the mouse and placed it on the keyboard. Even though it was only one hand, it was faster than her two hands. The file on the screen was quickly opened. Before she could clearly see what the young man was doing, the computer program changed. The cashier tilted her head, signaling for the staff to call the police. She mouthed, "Call 110. The staff was obviously shocked, pressing the phone button, afraid that the youngster would do something drastic. She covered the phone and said, "Hello." Right at this moment, the image on the computer screen popped up. Bojio calculated the time, pulling the video to 3 minutes ago. She saw the back view of the two people leaving. Then she continued to move forward. The camera couldn't capture the youngster's face, but there was a voice. Bojio could hear every single word she said clearly. "Fanjia." Bojio's fingers froze. When he heard that sentence, "You know better than anyone else that the person who made the biggest mistake in this matter was actually you. If you had listened to her, ignored everyone else, and cast aside your so-called responsibility, she wouldn't have died. Pitiful Z. Not only will she not be accepted by the world, she will also sink to the bottom of the ocean forever. You saw her struggling to get up. When she was young, you promised her that when she grew up, no matter what you did, you would put her first. You were the one who broke your promise first. You killed her." Bojio's fingertips turned cold. She should have thought of it. Why did he hate his past self so much? But she was still too stupid. She never knew that the knot in his heart had always been her. He felt sorry for her. That was why he became like this. He had thought of her, the little Bojio he knew when he was young. That was why he said those words to Director Huang. He wasn't looking for her because he wanted to capture her. He was simply looking for her. Bojio couldn't describe her feelings as she watched him leave with Fanjia. There was a murderous look in her eyes. It was strong and undisguised. She didn't stay here for long. After getting the image he wanted, he held onto the table with one hand and flipped over. He unlocked his phone with the other. "Give me an answer now, where exactly is Fanjia?" Young Master Tang heard the strangeness in her words. "What's wrong?" "Fanjia has the key to the hypnosis, the Almighty has left with her." Bojio's voice was clearly softer. Young Master Tang stilled, aware of the severity of the situation. He gave Bojio an address and turned to instruct his men. "Send more plainclothes officers and use the police dogs. The operation is to be carried out 2 hours earlier." "Yes." But even so, they weren't faster than her. On this day, almost everyone who lived in the North City district saw a black Lamborghini. It was just like a racing scene in a movie. It sped from the asphalt road into the long alley. The left wheel was pressed against the wall, the car slanted as though it was a black bolt of lightning. Bojio held onto the steering wheel with one hand while the other looked at the back of the car. With a turn of her tail, she shook off the police car that had been following her. The police car had been called by the supermarket staff. At first, they had assumed that she was here to rob them, but when they saw her car, they chased her for a whole street. When they questioned the convenience store staff, they found out that she had only taken a glance at the supermarket surveillance camera. In that instant, they didn't know if they should continue the chase. Actually, they didn't need to think about it, because no one could catch up to Z, especially the current Z. The bats whizzed past, bringing with them the wind. At this moment, the taxi had reached its destination. Fanjia smiled sweetly at Chinamo. "You definitely won't like this place." "I don't like it either, but I have no choice, I'm forced to stay here. But things will get better soon. Once we leave the country, no one will be able to control us and I will be able to move around freely." Chinamo remained silent. It seemed as though he had been like this the entire time. He didn't even know if he heard what she was saying. Fanjia clenched her fists, feeling extremely indignant. But at the same time, she knew that some things couldn't be rushed. The two of them continued walking, turning into a long alley and heading upstairs. Suddenly they stopped in front of a door. Chinamo stopped. Fanjia turned. What's wrong? Could it be that he wasn't going to listen to her again? That was impossible. In his heart, she was the most important person. Even if it was his body and behavior, he couldn't accept it, but his hypnosis kept telling him this. That was indeed the case. Chinamo seemed to be imprisoned. All he could think about was protecting this person. There's a problem around here. Fan Jiao was right about one thing. With Qin Mo around, it would be difficult for the police to find them. Is this room yours? Qin Mo's voice was emotionless. MMH, Fan Jiao replied. Brother Mo, isn't it shabby? Don't worry, the situation will change soon. Qin Mo didn't know why he felt disgusted when she called his name. It's not broken or not, the lock has been tampered with. Don't go in, there might be people inside. Continue walking forward and go down that way. Qin Mo nodded. Fan Jiao broke out in cold sweat when she heard this. A cheap house like this wouldn't be visited by a thief. Under normal circumstances, staying in the room was one of the high-end methods of the police, waiting for the suspect to fall into the trap before taking action. Fortunately, this person had seen through it in advance. Fortunately, she had covered her face. Do you see the person smoking in front of the shop not far away? He should be a stalker. It's best if you don't act suspiciously. Qin Mo's voice was still emotionless. There was even a hint of disgust in his voice. Of course, Fan Jiao could hear it. But so what? Wasn't he still trying to protect her with the words he said now? So this was what he had been relying on in the past. Childhood sweethearts who had grown up together. Even if she was a criminal, she could become the most unique one? From today onwards. Chapter 1338. Very quickly, Fan Jiao realized things weren't as she had imagined. Qin Mo didn't have much feelings for her. Fan Jiao wasn't willing to give up. She wanted to pretend to be afraid so that he would care about her. However, he spoke before she could. It'll be easier to be discovered if you walk around like this. Go to the noodle shop on the left. Qin Mo's tone was calm when he spoke. Fan Jiao was still worried. Isn't that too obvious? It's too close to the street. The closer we are to the street, the better the view. Qin Mo didn't seem to like explaining. Regardless of what Fan Jiao said, he didn't speak. He approached the noodle shop and asked for a seat by the window. The angle was ingenious. Because of the decorations on the table, people outside wouldn't be able to see what they looked like. However, the people inside could clearly see what was going on outside. Moreover, the shop was at a triangular corner. This meant that not only could they see the pedestrians in front, but they could also see the movements on the left and right. After Qin Mo sat down, he didn't order noodles. Instead, he ordered a cup of hot tea. Fan Jiao watched the plainclothes officers walk past the window. That was when she understood why Qin Mo was sitting there. She was good at anti-detection. The ordinary police wouldn't be able to catch her. However, Fan Jiao could sense the difference in the plainclothes officers this time. They had come so fiercely that she could only hide in such a poor place. There were no cameras here. It wouldn't be easy for them to find her. But if they really carried out a carpet search, it would be hard for her to escape. What scared Fan Jiao the most was that they already knew which building she was staying in. Fortunately, she had made a move in advance and used the hypnosis key. As expected, as long as Qin Mo was around, everything would be done with half the effort. Fan Jiao knew why her master had wanted him to become a member of the organization in the past. Because having Qin Mo was equivalent to having a divine weapon. Regardless of whether it was for protection or killing, he was the most valuable. Now Fan Jiao could clearly see his value. He could drink tea leisurely in front of the plainclothes officers without being discovered. He was a natural-born criminal. Fan Jiao smiled. From now on, they would be in the same world. The plainclothes guards were still pacing back and forth outside. Something seemed to have happened as their footsteps became much more hurried. Something had indeed happened. It was the person hiding in the house who discovered the problem. Young Master Tang, the landlord, said that Fan Jiao came back but she didn't enter the room. We didn't see her on the other floors, not even the first floor. What should we do? Get out of the room first. Retreat? Yes, there's no point in continuing to wait. If Fan Jiao had been with Qin Mo, these tricks would have been nothing in front of him. Then, wait a minute, who are you and what are you doing here? Before the plainclothes man could finish his words, a slender figure suddenly appeared in front of the door. It was a young man around 18 years old. He had his head lowered and was looking at the door lock. His eyes were slightly narrowed and no one knew what he was thinking. The plain-clothed man was about to walk over and hold him down to interrogate him. Unexpectedly, the moment his hand touched the youngster's shoulder, the youngster pushed him back. Then he heard the youngster's cold voice. "They were here, you just didn't notice." What? The plainclothes man was stunned. Just as he was about to ask something, he heard a voice. Just as he was about to ask, the youngster released his hand and turned to walk in another direction. His gaze landed on the pile of rubbish that had been stepped on. "They went down from here, so half of your efforts were in vain. Who exactly are you?" The plain-clothed man couldn't help frowning. Are you a student from around here? Kid, let me tell you, don't be like Detective Conan just because you watch too much anime. We still have to search for evidence, you. The plain-clothed man hadn't expected that before he could finish his sentence, a voice interrupted him. He was interrupted by the voice on the other end of the phone. How old is the person you're talking to? 10, I think he's 18, the plain-clothed man stuttered. He hadn't expected young Master Tang to ask such a question. The most surprising thing was that the question continued. He's rather handsome with silver hair? Yes. Then it's her. I'll need at least 2 hours to get there. During these 2 hours, the entire team will listen to her commands. No matter how shocked they were, they would obey the orders given by their superiors. But no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't figure out what kind of person could make young Master Tang so sure of their abilities. Moreover, the other party looked like a student no matter how he looked at him. Since they were so close, Bojo could hear their conversation. She watched the shocked expression on the plainclothes man's face but didn't say a word. She didn't want to lead the team either. She just wanted to find someone as soon as possible. However, this phone call was also beneficial. Firstly, no matter what she did in the vicinity, these plainclothes officers would not arrest her. Secondly, she had also obtained some information. She had been here but did not enter the building, which meant that the police's operation was successful at first, but someone had seen through them. Bojo didn't think Fan Jia would be the one to see through it. Only the Almighty would be able to observe something as detailed as the lock. Through the video in the supermarket, Bojo already knew the key to hypnosis. She knew that the Almighty had mistaken Fan Jia for her. She didn't know how effective hypnosis was. She only knew one thing. If the Almighty was really trying to avoid the police, he definitely wouldn't be like Fan Jia who would hide in the shadows. He would be very calm, right in front of you, one step ahead of you, occupying the best spot without you noticing. Bojo closed her eyes, thinking about the few times they had crossed paths. At the same time, she recalled the times when she thought she had escaped safely, only to be caught by the Almighty. Suddenly her eyes widened, bright as stars. Field of vision. Regardless of the situation, field of vision was the most important. Bojo swept the pile of rubbish downstairs. She leaped over with large strides, her eyes watching the people walking back and forth. The environment here wasn't good. The streets were dirty and messy, even the building was on the verge of being demolished. Just like that, it was in an alley. But even such a place had its own terrain. Bojo scanned the roads on her left, right, front, and back. Gradually, a map formed in her mind. This was the place to stay, this was the market, that was the convenience supermarket, and after another turn there was a three-way junction, the noodle shop. Chapter 1339. The noodle shop was too small and inconspicuous. Honestly, if Bojo hadn't tried hard, she wouldn't have been able to remember it. But at the same time, she knew that such a place would be easily overlooked. It was too ordinary and normal. However, its geographical location and perspective were indeed excellent. It was just like how she liked to eat oden in the convenience store when she was in disguise, watching the police cars fly past her. Bojo glanced up abruptly. The tip of her tongue touched the roof of her mouth. This time, was she here to stop him? Bojo was smart. She didn't let the plainclothes guard follow her. She didn't even choose to enter from the left, right, and front. Instead, she walked to the back, removed her black trench coat and wrapped it around her hand. Then she pushed against the wall and walked into the kitchen. When the chef saw the sudden appearance of a person, his hand that was scooping up the noodles paused. What was going on? The most important thing was that the child took away the shredded meat noodles he had cooked. She had taken it away. Bojo had indeed taken a plate of noodles. That was because the Almighty hadn't eaten dinner in order to buy sweets for her. Of course, she was prepared for the fact that she would be facing two people later. Bojo dragged the plate with one hand and stuffed the other into her pocket. She walked towards the window. Fan Jia's back was facing her, so she didn't see the person approaching them. But Chinamo was different. He seemed nonchalant, but in reality he could sense the slightest movement. Moreover, the person who didn't seem like a waiter was walking towards them with a plate. Chinamo found that person familiar. But the reason he didn't shift his gaze wasn't because of the familiarity. It was because of the smile on her lips. It was interesting, as though she was saying, "Look, I knew you would be here." Chinamo arched a brow. Fan Jia didn't know what he was looking at. By the time she turned around, her expression had completely changed. The venom in her eyes wasn't concealed at all. How did she find her way here? Fan Jia bolted upright, picking up the knife hidden in her bag and pointing it at Bojo. She lowered her body slightly and placed the plate of shredded pork noodles in front of him, her voice carrying a hint of dissatisfaction. Brother Mo, I really didn't expect you to be tricked away when you were buying sweets. Here the noodles are freshly cooked, eat it while it's hot. I know you don't remember me again. Actually, I feel that after I stop gaming I can write a book called, My Boyfriend Loses His Memory Every Once in a While. Chinamo didn't speak. He was observing the youngster. Fan Jia watched from the side, the venom in her eyes growing thicker and thicker. In the end she couldn't take it anymore. She lowered her head and smiled, her voice like a snake's. Brother Mo, this is the person who has been trying to hurt me. Help me kill her. Bo Jio's fingers stilled. She knew very well what would happen if a hypnosis was turned on. She was still too impulsive and wanted to bring him back, so she walked in just like that. But she forgot about Fan Jia's treachery. Fan Jia seemed to be enjoying the feeling, her lips curling into an uncontrollable smile. Chapter 1340. Chinamo didn't move. Why wasn't he moving? Fan Jia glanced towards him. He clutched onto the amulet again, his eyes emotionless, but that proved one thing. The hypnosis wasn't enough for him to kill Z. He could have done it when he was facing other people. Why wasn't it working against this person? Fan Jia clenched her fists, her eyes filled with indignation. But very quickly she realized something. Although it was impossible for him to kill that woman, if the other party hurt her, he would do it. That wasn't all, he was looking at her with a foreign gaze. Which meant that Z's arrogance would end here. Brother Mo, she will take me away, she will definitely take me away. She's in cahoots with the people outside, please help me. Fan Jia's eyes shifted. She sheathed her knife and leaned over helplessly. Brother Mo, she will take me away, she will definitely take me away. As expected. Chinamo reached out and blocked Fan Jia, his eyes dimmed. His voice didn't seem to be replying to Fan Jia, instead he seemed to be telling himself, I won't allow anyone to take you away. With that, Bo Jio paused, glancing up towards Fan Jia. Fan Jia revealed half of her face, her gaze sinister. She seemed to be saying, come over if you dare. Bo Jio narrowed her eyes. Indeed, she didn't like this scene, even though she was mentally prepared. Fan Jia was still acting pitiful, calling him Brother Mo, but in reality she was trying to provoke Bo Jio. This way, if Z were to take action against her, Chinamo wouldn't disobey her commands like before. Whoever hurt her would die. That was the real hypnosis in his mind. The more Fan Jia thought about it, the brighter the smile on her face. She couldn't wait to see the arrogant Z beaten down by Chinamo. She couldn't wait to see how heartbroken she would be. Fan Jia took another step forward. Her motive was to make it easier for Bo Jio to touch her. Who would have thought that the man would laugh lightly, pull the wooden chair from the next table with one hand, and sit down with his long legs spread apart. He was extremely nonchalant. I'm not interested in a rat living in the gutter like you. Catching you is the police's job. If I really want to take someone away, I'll take my boyfriend. Also, Brother Mo, do you think you can call him that? Miss Fan, it's really funny. Do you spend your entire life trying to copy someone else, only to realize that a fake is a fake and will never be real? Fan Xian was speechless when she heard Fan Xian's words. The last sentence caused Fan Jia's expression to change completely. She had to use all her strength to suppress the urge to stab this person. She knew that she couldn't expose herself at such a time. Her eyes reddened. What you mean by insulting me? It's fine if you want to kill me, but now you are denying me? My relationship with Brother Mo isn't something you can break up with just a few words. If you want to arrest him, then arrest him. Don't try to sow discord here. Bo Jio didn't reply. Instead, she turned towards Chinamo. Logically speaking, with his intelligence, he should have been able to tell the problem, even if he had lost his memory. Logically speaking, with his intelligence, there was no way he wouldn't be able to identify the problem, even if he lost his memory. Logically speaking, with his intelligence, he should have been able to tell the problem, even if he had lost his memory. But now he had no intention of not protecting Fan Jia. It had to do with the key of the hypnosis. During the setup, you set the fingerprint as the owner and it would recognize this fingerprint. At that time, Fan Jia had been the only person in front of him. That was the function of the key. It would cause a person's tolerance to collapse completely and then lure out the hypnosis in the deepest part of his mind, completing the setup. Unless there was a breakthrough. But Bo Jio had no idea what was the breakthrough point in his heart. Originally, she had assumed that he would know the fake Fan Jia was the moment he saw her. But from the looks of it, it didn't matter anymore, it was the initial setup. She could only recover her memory. There was no other way. Or perhaps she would watch him wherever he went. Bojo glanced up, noticing that he was looking at her, his gaze deep. Then, he asked, "Are you always this dirty?" Bojo asked, "Dirty? There's something on your clothes. Didn't your family tell you that it's best not to climb over walls in places like the back kitchen?" Chinmo's voice was neither warm nor cold, and there was even a hint of lecturing in it. Bojo pouted. "In the past, my boyfriend told me about it, but now that he has lost his memory, he doesn't even care about me anymore. I'm almost a child that no one wants." Chinmo looked at the youngster in front of him, his fingers pausing. It had nothing to do with him. Chinmo didn't know why, but when he heard that sentence, his heart skipped a beat. He wanted to reach out his hand and touch that messy head of black hair. This thought made his chest ache intensely, as if he had betrayed someone. Bojo sensed his odd behavior. Because it was too obvious, he held his chest with one hand, his brows furrowed, and even his lips were frighteningly pale. Just how painful was it for him to be like this? Bojo reached out to help him, but he took a step back, one hand extended, still protecting Fanjia. "I think I understand. What is your self-suggestion? Because you always feel that you didn't protect me well. That's why you ended up like this." Bojo inhaled deeply, glancing at the plainclothes officers who were about to enter. She immediately signaled them not to come over. She understood the Almighty too well. Perhaps her approach was fine. But if it was the plainclothes officers, he would sense danger. Now he would get rid of anything that was dangerous. "Let them go." This was the first thing Bojo said after she came out. The plainclothes officers widened their eyes. One of them didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Do you know what you were talking about?" If it hadn't been for young Master Tang's orders, he would have assumed that the youngster wasn't helping them but the criminal. Even though he was the one who had found the criminal, he couldn't be so reckless. Chapter 1341. The undercover officer wanted to speak. Bojo laughed lightly, interrupting him. "If you don't trust my judgment, you can give young Master Tang a call now." The undercover officer panicked, replying with a stern expression, "I have to consult my superior." Bojo gestured for him to make the call. The undercover officer immediately made the call, expecting young Master Tang to consider it seriously. Unexpectedly, the instructions he received were the same as before. "Just listen to her arrangements, but there is something she is trying to trick you about. Regardless of whether you rush in or not, Chinmo will still be holding hostages. Nothing will happen if you let him go, but if you don't, there will be two outcomes. Innocent people will be implicated and the city will be plunged into chaos. This time, you aren't facing an ordinary criminal. He can't even be considered a criminal because he hasn't committed any actual crimes. Just as you said, he hasn't started holding hostages. If it wasn't for the person next to you, you wouldn't have found him. He wouldn't have needed to take any hostages. You can ask the person next to you. If Chinmo really took a hostage, what would she do?" Bojo laughed. "Did you purposely put me on speaker? It's just holding hostages. I'll be Brother Mo's hostage later. I can't possibly watch my boyfriend leave with another woman. I have a temper too." "Your temper is to be a hostage." Young Master Tang chuckled. "You are going through so much trouble to prevent Chinmo from having any bad records. Let me guess what you are trying to imply. You didn't allow everyone to take action because Chinmo would take action if anyone harmed Fanjia. On the other hand, as long as Fanjia is safe, he wouldn't take any lives. This situation isn't comfortable at all. Z, there are many people who like you. I think Hoshino isn't bad. Why do you have to spend the rest of your life on a tree? You can make more choices and we can make a deal. Hand Chinmo over to me and you won't interfere with him. The Tang sect will provide you with anything you want and I promise nothing will happen to him. How about that?" Bojo tapped her fingers. "It's a good deal, but young Master Tang, you seem to have misunderstood something. In this world, there is only one thing I want, Chinmo. That's a pity." Young Master Tang didn't sound regretful. He didn't seem surprised that she would make such a decision. "I didn't expect Z to like someone so much." Bojo paused, lowering her voice. "Just now, when Fanjia ordered him to kill me, his first reaction was to grab the amulet I gave him when he was young. You won't understand, actually he loves you more than you love him." Young Master Tang chuckled. "Z, didn't I tell you that Chinmo and I are people who would risk our lives once we fall in love?" Bojo wasn't as upset as before. "I have to say, your love story can be comforting at times. Even though you are still single and haven't gotten the person you want, it doesn't stop you from sharing your thoughts." Young Master Tang. "Is this gratitude?" Bojo didn't think there was anything wrong with her sharp tongue. Anyone who tried to persuade her to break up with her brother Mo deserved to be stung. Bojio turned and walked back to the noodle shop. Chin Mo saw the interaction between her and the plainclothes officer outside. However, what she said next made him look up. They won't make a move for now, but I'm guessing you won't be at ease. How about this? I'll be your hostage. With a hostage, even if they have a sniper, they won't open fire. This was the first time Chin Mo had met a hostage. His gaze swept past her face. Her skin was so fair that even the fine hair could be seen clearly. She was smiling, the tip of her nose stained with dust. There was a small tuft of hair that was as harmless as a kitten. But there was a natural sense of danger. Anyone smart wouldn't choose this person as a hostage. Bojio knew he was thinking. She stood there, allowing him to size her up. She even leaned forward and asked, "Do you find me especially beautiful? Tie me up so you can admire me." Chin Mo arched a brow. Firstly, it was because of the distance. Secondly, it was because she was indeed beautiful. Fanjia watched from the side, her teeth clenched in pain. "We don't need a hostage." Then she walked out of the noodle shop. After she had taken 5 steps away, Chin Mo took a step forward. Bojio watched without a change in expression. This seemed to be the first time she saw his back view. She thought about it carefully. Because every time he would be the first to watch her leave. In the past, she had always assumed that her departure would be the most painful. But now she suddenly understood something. Back then he was the one who had waited at the same spot the most painful. For some reason Bojio was reminded of the interview. Someone had asked him why he wanted to play in the professional league. He had replied, "Because the person I'm looking for likes to play." It wasn't just when they were young. Even after they had grown up, he had always been waiting for her. Bojio's gaze followed the slender figure to the next spot. 5 steps. Did the hypnosis include staying a few meters away from Fanjia? Bojio followed him. If he didn't want a hostage, she would be his neighbor. Fanjia was certain that they wouldn't make a move. From the looks of the person just now, he seemed to have guessed something. She had wanted to use this chance to get Chin Mo to kill 1 or 2 people. That was the only way she would be able to relax. After being stained with innocent blood, he would never be the Chin Mo of the past. That was the final form of his personality. Yet Z kept ruining her plans time and time again. Fanjia hated him to the core. But she knew that she couldn't do anything to him. But so what? She was the one who wanted him to follow her closely, not her. If she wanted to follow him, she could do as she pleased. At the same time, she could witness how Chin Mo treated her with her own eyes. If she couldn't see it, she would tell her. Fang Jia's eyes lit up. When she turned, she suddenly paused and said to Chin Mo, "Brother Mo, stay here. I'll go and have a chat with that person. Don't worry, I won't be more than 5 steps away from you." Chin Mo remained silent. But Fanjia knew that from a certain perspective, her words were a hint to him. She smiled and walked towards her. Chapter 1342. Bojio arched a brow but didn't retreat. She stuffed a hand into her pocket and watched Fanjia. "It's the Asian Cup tomorrow and it's already evening. When we enter the room at night, you won't be able to do anything. I know you really want to bring him to the competition, but it's such a pity. He won't leave me now. No matter who comes, the result will be the same." Fanjia chuckled and lowered her voice. "Don't waste your energy. Don't you know that the Asian Cup is tomorrow?" Bojio watched her, asking slowly, "Your plan worked. You disguised yourself as me and completed the setup. Logically speaking, he should be close to you, but he didn't allow you to touch him. Why do you think that is?" Fanjia's eyes dimmed. "Z, you really don't know when to give up. I've always been like this." Bojio leaned forward, smiling brightly. "You should be thankful that he is by your side now. Otherwise, I'm not sure which sea I would throw you into." Fanjia clenched her fists. "You don't have to be so arrogant. He didn't listen to my orders to kill you today, but that doesn't mean he won't do it tomorrow. You are smart, you should know that the hypnosis will get stronger over time. Do I need to remind you? Sooner or later, he'll realize that I'm the one he should have chosen the most. I've done so much for him and you'll be nothing. You can stop talking about how you have to like me just because I like you. If destroying something he cares about is considered liking someone, no one in the world would want that kind of liking." Bojio's gaze was cold, without a hint of warmth. Fanjia didn't get the upper hand. Hence, she clenched her fists tighter. "So what? I'm the one by his side in the end. As for you, you won't be able to bring him back for the Asian Cup and you won't be able to compete either. Hee, you have to suffer. Z, no one who goes against me has a good ending. You're too naive. That's why you gave us the chance to attack him. You think you're the savior and want to save everyone. You're so arrogant, but you're just an ordinary person who can't even deal with a little girl. People like you don't deserve to stay by his side. With that, she turned back to Chin Imo and smiled. Brother Imo, let's head up. Bojo didn't reply. She stuffed a hand into her pocket and followed behind. Actually, she didn't like this feeling at all. But she disliked not seeing him even more. Gradually, the sky darkened. The last ray of sunset also lost its color as night fell. Bojo's phone kept ringing, but she had no intention of picking it up. After receiving it, he didn't know how to tell Lin Feng and the others. She lost the Almighty again. Fanjia was right about one thing. She was too pretentious and always failed to grasp what she should grasp. He knew that Fanjia's target in Jiang City was him. She should have followed him 24/7 back then. But she had been distracted because she wanted to catch Fanjia. There was a huge commotion online. In order to vent her anger, she had lost him again. With this thought, Bojo moved her fingers and glanced up. She walked towards the Lamborghini parked in the long alley. She stepped on the accelerator and drove little Blackie downstairs. Chin Imo stood upstairs. He didn't need to look down to see what was going on downstairs. Even though the building was old, it had a good view. Standing in front of the window, he could see everything that was happening outside. At the start, he saw the youngster's drooping ears. He couldn't tell what she was thinking about. She didn't look as handsome as when she had served him noodles at the noodle shop. Instead, she looked pitiful. Chin Imo moved instinctively. He didn't want to continue watching. He didn't know why, but whenever he saw that person, he would feel a sharp pain in his chest. That kind of pain was unbearable several times. But the moment he left, he couldn't help but look again. When he stood by the window again, he realized that there was no one outside. Chin Imo couldn't describe the feeling. His chest finally stopped hurting, but the emptiness made him feel even worse. It was as though something had been dug out. There was even a very, very small voice that was saying something. Look, she finally couldn't wait any longer and left. Chin Imo reached out to grab the amulet around his neck. It was the only way he could get rid of the voice. Fanjia stood at the side watching the entire scene. Her eyes were filled with indignation. They were already in the same room, but his gaze never lingered on her. Brother Imo, Fanjia said, her voice sounding like she was about to cry. I'm afraid that you will abandon me again. Chin Mo's gaze wavered. He tightened his grip. Fanjia knew her voice worked. She walked over, wanting to take the chance to hug his waist from behind. However, he raised his eyes and walked to the window again, leaving only air behind. Fanjia was infuriated. She followed his gaze and saw the culprit who had ruined her plan once again. What she couldn't stand the most was his gaze. Why did his gaze only land on that person? Chin Imo was indeed looking at her. It wasn't intentional, but the person standing at the bottom of the building was too dazzling. He didn't know where she had gotten a bunch of balloons from. They were huge and there were lights inside, colorful and beautiful. She seemed to know he was looking at her. She placed one hand into her pocket and smiled. Then she released her hand. The balloons floated up. At this moment, Chin Imo saw the words clearly. My boyfriend, are you hungry? There were 9 balloons, each with a word written on it. After seeing it, Chin Imo arched a brow. Even he didn't realize that the corners of his lips curved up slightly. But when Fanjia saw the smile, her eyes were filled with jealousy. Bojo didn't care what Fanjia thought. After knowing that Chin Imo had received her message, she called the delivery boy over. She bit on her pen and wrote a line of words on the delivery order. She smiled lightly. The food is for the customer in the building above. Please pass this paper to the handsome guy standing by the window. It was the first time the delivery boy had encountered such a situation. He glanced up at the balloons floating in the sky. Is that really your boyfriend? MMH. Bojo replied, adding another line on the list. The delivery boy was puzzled. Why is he with another girl? Because he lost his memory. Bojo paused. Then she laughed. My boyfriend is good at everything, but he always uses his memory loss to spite me. He isn't like that when he is normal. Any girl that tries to get close to him will be treated like a germ. The deliver man was confused. He looked like he didn't understand what she was saying. But nowadays all sorts of weird things happened. Not to mention adding words on the delivery list. Some people who ordered takeout would even add on the condition, please send a handsome man to deliver it to me. The delivery boy went upstairs out of habit. Before he went upstairs, he took another look at the balloons. The next time his girlfriend was unhappy, he would do the same. It was rather romantic. Chin Imo stood upstairs watching as Bojo disappeared again. He didn't know about the conversation between her and the delivery boy. Similarly, Fanjia didn't know either. Hence, when someone knocked on the door, Fanjia asked, "Who is it?" Fanjia asked, "Who is it?" She heard the reply. "A delivery boy." She took a moment before opening the door. She knew that Z was the one who had arranged for the delivery. Since it was here, she would accept it. Not only would she accept it, but she would also eat with Chin Mo. It was time for Z to experience what it felt like to watch the two of them eat. Unexpectedly, after she opened the door, the delivery boy greeted her. "Hello." Then he added, "Handsome, there's a note for you." But Fanjia couldn't stop him in time. Chin Mo walked over and took the note. There was a line on it. "Do you like the balloons I gave you, boyfriend?" Fanjia was infuriated. She hadn't expected that her actions would inadvertently allow Z to spread the news. But that wasn't the end. "I ordered 2 sets of rice, one for myself and one for the delivery boy. I heard it's for couples. Even though it's a distance away, Brother Mo, you can see me eating when you lower your head." Chin Mo wasn't interested in how others ate. He was just curious about what the youngster was doing. He walked towards the window. Fanjia's wish had failed. She lost all her patience. She didn't want Z to see anything else. "Brother Mo, it's getting late. Let's sleep." She naturally switched off the lights in the living room and strolled towards the bedroom. She knew that even if Chin Mo wasn't intimate with her, he had to maintain a distance that could protect her. Fanjia smiled faintly as Chin Mo walked towards her. He didn't go to the living room window. Her lips curved upwards. She had said it before, it was useless. This person belonged to her. The hypnosis would be activated for more than 24 hours tomorrow afternoon. Once the 24 hours were up, she would be able to order him to kill. By then, his hands would be stained with blood. Fanjia was patient. She didn't mind waiting a little longer. However, she also noticed something. That amulet was an eyesore. Every time it interfered with her words. She had to wait a little longer. After a night, she would be able to get rid of this thing. The smile on Fanjia's face deepened at the thought. She had thought that Chin Mo would enter the bedroom with her. Unexpectedly, he stopped outside the bedroom a full 5 steps away. He didn't seem to have any intention of entering. Fanjia panicked. "Brother Mo, aren't you going to sleep? Are you going to stand here for the whole night?" In response, he leaned against the wall, stood slanted, hands in his pockets, and slowly closed his eyes. His meaning was very obvious. Fanjia wanted to eat with him. Who would have thought that he wouldn't even speak, let alone talk about eating or not eating? Without standing by the window, he was like a devil who had lost interest in his surroundings. He was covered in darkness. Fanjia tried to order him, but she was worried that it would backfire. It didn't matter if she waited another night. Anyway, they were sharing the same room. As for Z, she was afraid that she would think of many things. She didn't believe that Z could be that calm. Bojio wasn't that calm. Especially when she saw the light go off, the smile on her face disappeared. She threw the set meal into the bin. She told herself not to think too much. But she couldn't control herself and lit a cigarette for herself. The temperature outside was very low. She didn't know what the temperature in the room was like. She just felt cold all over. Fortunately, there was a heater in the car. But she didn't want to stay in the car. She wanted him to see her. She stood downstairs and smoked 7 or 8 cigarettes. When she couldn't take it anymore, she opened the car door. Bojio knew that Fanjia wasn't going to give them any chance to interact. But she didn't know if he was moved by what she had shown him. This was the first time Bojio felt that time was passing so slowly. The night was hard to bear. But if they really took action to capture Fanjia, she would fall into the opponent's trap. Bojio lifted her lids and glanced at the watch on her wrist. It was already 11 a.m. There were less than 12 hours until the competition started. 12 hours. How was she going to recover her memory? Bojio thought of many plans, but none of them were practical. When it was 2 a.m., she forced herself to rest. Because Fanjia would definitely have something up her sleeve. Moreover, the longer the hypnosis, the harder it would be to break. She knew that Fanjia was just wasting time by dragging it out. But even so, Bojio didn't know how to overcome it. She reached out and rubbed her temples. She looked at the cigarette butts on the floor. When she glanced at her watch again, another hour had passed. The comments online were still there. It was probably because there were less than 10 hours left. The official website started to count down. Even until now, there were still people who objected that Chin Mo and Spade Z shouldn't participate. Bojio's fingers slid. It was too cold. It was indeed cold. But she couldn't let go. Her fingers slid a few times. In the end, she tapped on a phone number. He Honghua. When He Honghua received the call, she woke up instantly. "Gio, is that Gio?" "It's me." Bojo chuckled. She glanced up at the darkened windows. It was 6 in the morning, less than 4 hours before the start of the Asian Cup. For hours she could almost predict all the results. She couldn't drag it any longer. No matter what, she had to keep the most important thing to him. Bojo took a step back. She buttoned the hood of her jacket, her figure tall and slender. When she spoke again, her voice was foggy. "I'm afraid I have to break my promise." Chapter 1343. He Honghua supported her head with her fingers. "Joe, why do you have to do this? You're just wasting your energy and the comments online won't stop." Bojo glanced up, her gaze landing on a spot. She laughed lightly. "I don't care." He Honghua stilled. The phone hung up. She knew she had made up her mind. In reality, He Honghua didn't know that Bojo wasn't lying. She wasn't the same as the other members of Supreme Alliance. It wasn't just esports, it was just him. She stopped because she wanted his victory to be even more pure. No one could predict the irresponsible remarks of some people. In order to avoid trouble and to ease He Honghua's worry, it wasn't a big deal for her to give up. But if he regained his memory one day, would he feel regretful? There was also Yao Yao, Lin Feng, Uncle and the others. Their hard work. That was the reason for her decision. Bojo stuffed her phone into her pocket. In less than half an hour, the sky would be completely bright. She leaned over to retrieve a pair of black leather gloves and a baseball bat. She held it in one hand and walked up the stairs. She used the bat to knock on the small window of the old-fashioned door. Whoosh! The floor was filled with glass shards. Bojo wasn't afraid since she wore the gloves. She pressed down with both hands, arched her body and entered. She landed quickly. Chinamo was leaning against the wall. When he heard the noise, he opened his eyes and looked at the youngster. Fanja ran out of the bedroom, her eyes widening at the sight. She hadn't expected him to use such a method to get in. Bojo didn't seem to see her, her gaze landing on Chinamo. She smiled lightly. "I have something to attend to and will be away for half a day. Before I leave, I want to tell you something. The most important person to you will always be around. What she is most upset about is that when you were looking for her, she didn't even realize it, giving someone a chance to take advantage of you, allowing them to grab hold of your weakness. You said that you want to stand in the most dazzling place and wait for her to notice you. You joined the professional league because she likes to play games. Now it's her turn to wait for you. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Brother Mo, that's the competition you want to participate in the most. You should come." Chin Mo's fingers moved. His chest felt like it was being pressed by a huge rock, especially when he saw the youngster turn and leave after saying that. That suffocating feeling became extremely clear. Shen Hua was worried that something would happen, so he asked, "Brother Mo, are you going to leave me behind again to do something else?" This sentence was like a code that pierced through a certain part of Chin Mo's expression. "I won't." That's right. Never again. He never wanted to leave that man behind and do something else. Knowing that she could sway him by saying that, Fanja smiled faintly. She knew what Z was going to do. He was still harboring illusions. No one in this world could break the hypnosis, and Chinamo couldn't recover his memory unless he could turn back time. Fanja glanced at the time on the clock, the smile in her eyes deepening. She still had to thank some people, the illegitimate fans who intentionally went against the officials. If it wasn't for them expressing their love, they would have stirred up negative discussions and caused Supreme Alliance trouble. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gotten what she wanted. These were the people that Feng Yi couldn't deal with. If he didn't deal with it, the rumors would spread even faster. If he didn't deal with it, there would be more rumors like Supreme Alliance didn't cherish their fans. Under such circumstances, Feng Yi would only run in two directions, which would cause him to be exhausted. That was what she had grasped at that time. No. Supreme Alliance wouldn't be able to escape from the abyss of suffering. She didn't need to do anything else. With those illegitimate fans around, the team would only get worse. As for Z, she would suffer the same fate. With that in mind, Fanja glanced over, catching sight of Chin Mo's hand pressing on his heart. She had never seen him in such a state. She wanted to reach out to help him. But he clutched onto the amulet again. Again and again. She couldn't even compare to a lousy amulet. Outside the building, Bojo turned on the taillights of the Lamborghini. Bojo switched on the taillights of the Lamborghini. She didn't drive little Blackie away. Instead, she said, "If Brother Mo disappears like you did in the military, I'll dismantle you and turn you into a cleaning robot." This was the most shameless threat little Blackie had ever heard. "Master, how can you bear to do this to your beloved car? A car can't take care of a person?" Bojo patted its headlights. Didn't you always complain about your monotonous life as a car? You can cultivate the joy of cleaning. As a smart car, little Blackie had its own optical drive analysis. As an outsider, how could it allow itself to be reduced to a broom? Even if it was an electronic one. The previous time was an accident, I fell asleep. What can I do? Besides, who knew that the devil would take action at night? Bojo chuckled, replying leisurely, "That's why I washed your car gently, I didn't dismantle you." Little Blackie felt that Master was in danger today. He was afraid that he would lose his life. Hence, he adjusted the channel, using his most magnetic and serious voice. "Master, don't worry, I won't let anyone touch your little vixen. Wherever he is, I will be there, I won't lose him." Bojo didn't say anything else, she patted it again. Little Blackie shivered, turning the headlights up a notch. When the plainclothes officers saw this scene, they only felt that they had encountered some kind of supernatural incident. They all looked at each other. They were all standing here, and the young man was really interesting. He didn't ask them for help, but actually asked for a car. The sky in the east started to brighten. It was impossible for General Qin not to receive Qin Mo's news. While Deputy Zhang was reporting, Movie Queen and had already woken up. She had wanted to hear something. It was impossible for someone like General Qin to not notice the presence of another person. After Deputy Zhang left, General Qin walked to the corner. He walked to the corner and looked at the pajamas on the ground. Then he squatted down, reached out a hand and pulled his wife into his arms. He was wearing a military uniform. "Even if you don't believe me, you have to believe in our son. He will be fine. I should have realized it a long time ago. We were too selfish back then. When we were busy, we sent him overseas. When we weren't busy, we wanted to bring him back. We didn't even ask him if he was willing." Movie Queen and was no different from a child in General Qin's embrace. Tears welled up in her eyes. "He has treasured that amulet since he was young. I don't know what he placed in it. When I asked Dad, he said that it was a memory he didn't want to forget. All these years we thought it was best for him not to remember it. After all, that way he could live a normal life in Jiang City. But who knew what he was thinking?" General Qin hugged her tighter. "It's all my fault, I'm to blame. I should blame you. Let me tell you, if our son doesn't come back, we will divorce." Movie Queen and didn't let go of him. "Do you think that amulet will protect our son?" General Qin, who never believed in such things, lowered his voice. "It definitely will. If that little girl was still around, she would definitely protect him. After all, the two of them had been so close in the past. After all, in order to clear Zi's name, he had done so much. No one knew about it. Perhaps he didn't care about it. When he was young, his son had told him not to catch anyone who knew how to use a computer. At that time, he had treated it as a child's words. Now that he thought about it, it was probably because he liked it too much. Hence, he had thought about it in the future. Yes, because he liked it too much. The first reaction of liking was to protect it. Qin Mo wasn't the only one who thought about it. Bojo too. She had never been so clear about it before. What did she want? It wasn't just to protect that person. It was to protect that person's dream. Since it was a dream, she had to stand in a corner and be clean. Ding! That was the sound of the mall's door being pushed open. At 8 o'clock, some places weren't open yet. Of course, there were still people working. At 8:30, the crowd started to surge. Bojo walked in. The sales lady smiled. "Hello, do you need me to make an introduction? The men's clothing isn't on this floor." "I know." Bojo stuffed her hands into her pockets and removed her mask. She smiled. "But I didn't go the wrong way." When she saw that face, the sales lady's heart skipped a beat. It was really handsome. Right at this moment. Jiang City Bird's Nest. The transparent building was 258,000 square meters. There were fans queuing up to check their tickets and enter. There were balloons flying into the sky and three-dimensional cosplayers. Under the camera, it was a cool and spectacular sight. As time passed by, all the units were ready. The director in charge of the live stream directed the floor staff. For the third time, they tested the volume and network. Everything was in place. At 9 o'clock, all the competing teams started to enter. There were 4 teams in this competition. It was like a 2-on-1 battle. The 2 teams that won would enter the finals. They had already drawn lots the last time. Many people were saying that it was fortunate that Supreme Alliance wasn't up against the Japanese. Otherwise, they would have been finished before the competition had even started. That wasn't wrong. However, the Japanese weren't the only strong team in the Asian Cup. Every team that could participate in the competition was at the international level. Many experienced esports fans felt that Supreme Alliance wouldn't be able to go up against them. 9:15 p.m. Supreme Alliance's lounge. Lin Feng glanced up. Still no news. MMH. Yun Hu was the one who replied. It had never been so gloomy. But some of the fans felt as though they had helped their idols, getting rid of all the people who didn't treat their team well. Shui Yaoyao and Coco looked at a corner in a daze. It seemed as though they had lost all their fighting spirit. At this moment the door opened. Was Feng. He didn't look any different from before, his suit still neat. He glanced around the lounge and smiled. Do you guys want to lose before the battle starts? Do you guys not even have a chance to let Little Spade and young Master Qin come back? Of course not. Feng Shang bolted up, his face flushed. Feng Yi glanced at his brother, raising his hand in a gesture that Qin Mo used to do backstage. Since that isn't the case, play well. Don't tell me you can't do it? Who said we can't? Swoosh. Everyone put their hands on it. Feng Yi chuckled. Do you know, once you compete, the people here will be able to see you again. Be it young Master Qin or Little Spade, there will be gifts for you during the official introduction. Take a good look when you enter. Come on, Supreme Alliance. Victory! They shouted with tears in their eyes. No one seemed to be able to hear them. This was because they were always like this. When they entered the battlefield, they would always wipe away their tears first. 9:30. Numerous staff members wore their walkie-talkies and work cards. The Western Europe and China national flags rose slowly. The director raised his hand, signaling to the MC. 10, 9, 7, 6. The drumbeat grew louder. 3, 2, 1. Swoosh. The lights lit up. The screen lit up. There was a paragraph of introduction in the middle. They had once fallen into the endless darkness. Today they came out vowing to become kings. Their name was Supreme Alliance. Before the crowd could cheer, the image changed, showing the faces of the people in their uniforms. Their voices rang out one after another. Hello everyone, I'm Supreme Alliance's top laner Yin Wuyao. Hello everyone, I'm Supreme Alliance's middle laner, Rao Rong. Hello everyone, I'm Supreme Alliance's support, Lin Feng. Hello everyone, I'm Supreme Alliance's ADC Yun Hu. Hello everyone. When this self-introduction came out, the whole place was silent. So many people were looking up at the big screen, listening to the voices of the people they liked the most. Until the final landing point rang out as though it could ignite their blood. Hello everyone, I'm Supreme Alliance's captain, Qin Mo, whoosh. Almost everyone stood up, cheering uncontrollably. At this moment the video seemed to shatter, merging back together. In the end, stars flashed. It was a scene from the provincial finals. An assassin in black had killed his way into the opponent's blood pool without any support. Double kill. Triple kill. Quadrikill. Pentakill. 5 consecutive kills, Spade Z. The shoutcaster screamed at the top of his lungs, but no one could hear his voice. When they saw the ID, some of the female fans reached out to cover their mouths. They were touched. Touched that many haters didn't understand. Regardless of what you said in the past. Would you be moved for a moment? That youngster stood in front of the screen, her head lowered. Every time she turned the tide, she would land a critical hit. Would the handsomeness of her fingers moving the mouse be denied just because she was a girl? No, it wasn't. The youngster who walked out from the darkness with a lollipop in her mouth, the one who could kill with her headphones. Chapter 1344. Right at this moment, as though to coincide with the scene, the host in a suit picked up the microphone and announced, "The Hero Asia Finals officially begins." The light beam shot down. All sounds and images froze. The focus was on the left and right sides. Supreme Alliance was on the left and Theo on the right. Everyone was cheering for the team they supported. A gust of wind blew, causing his black and red uniform to flutter. Another person wearing the same combat uniform walked out from inside. Their eyes were deep, as though they were burning with fire. Some people said that they had all the meaning of youth in them. You and your dorm mates would fight in front of the computer just to watch a match. The youngster you loved hugged you and said, "Look, this is the team I like." You and your bestie can talk about them until the wee hours of the morning under the same quilt. Just when you thought that was the end of life, you would lift your head and see that there was a team that had never aged. Regardless of how many years passed, they would never forget. But now they were missing 2 members. The 2 that were supposed to be at the front didn't appear, even though some of them were mentally prepared. But when he saw this lineup, his face went blank for a moment. Some of the audience members who had stood up returned to their seats with disappointment written all over their faces. Some of them had even begun to whisper to each other. Why isn't Almighty Qin here? I thought Big Spade and Almighty Qin would appear. Even though there have always been discussions online, they shouldn't be unable to withstand this pressure. Seriously, the tickets were wasted. Sometimes, esports players faced such situations. They were the ones who said that Qin Emo had lost his ability. Now that he wasn't coming, they said that he couldn't withstand the pressure. It wasn't as if the Supreme Alliance couldn't hear it. Even Theo heard them. He didn't understand, but when he saw the commotion, he glanced over and asked the interpreter beside him. There was a slight change in the atmosphere. But regardless of the atmosphere, it was brought back by the host. Everyone must be looking forward to seeing how exciting the two teams will be. Let's cut to the chase and take a look at the order of the first two matches. They were both international teams. Of course, he would not come to the competition with an attitude of underestimating his opponent. But the news of Qin Mo's absence was a pleasant surprise for Theo. In fact, when they had alighted from the plane yesterday, they had received news that Qin Mo had lost his memory and might not be able to participate in the competition. But they always thought that it was just fake news sent out to confuse them. Now it seemed that it was true. They didn't have to worry too much. After all, in this kind of international esports competition, the Chinese teams were always at the bottom. They were also fearful of Qin Mo, who had once given them a hard time. They had even specially trained him for a month. Now Theo had a secret weapon. It was obvious that Supreme Alliance wasn't their match. Supreme Alliance's lineup is out. Rao Rong 1-on-1. It was Yin Wuyao and Lin Feng. If it were me, I would also choose the same order of appearance, the commentator said. Another commentator said, oh? What? Theo's team doesn't just have strong teamwork, they are also one of the best in individual combat. Supreme Alliance will have to grit their teeth and win one of the two matches. That way they will have a chance to enter the team battle. If they don't win this match, it will mean that Supreme Alliance has lost. Which means you think Supreme Alliance will have a tough match. This is the Asian Cup after all, but I believe in each team's ability. The shoutcasters were from different countries, and with them, it would be easier for them to look at the situation. Rao Rong is up. I remember he has always been a team controller. Is he really fine in a solo match? You don't know about this. In fact, for a long time, when Rao Rong was in another team, even when he was the team controller, he dealt the most damage in the entire team. That shows how strong he is in solo fights. Moreover, as a starter, it is normal to admit that there is a lot of psychological pressure. Rather than saying that solo fights are a competition of skills, it is more accurate to say that the bigger the competition, the more emphasis is placed on the player's ability to withstand pressure. Theo's solo player doesn't seem to be under much pressure. There is indeed a difference. Theo's lineup has never changed and the first player is used to the rhythm. More importantly, even if he loses this match with Theo's ability, he has faith in his teammates to win. Rao Rong's situation is different. He has been through so many things and has just joined Supreme Alliance. He might be under a lot of pressure. Soon the shoutcaster caught sight of the figure on the screen and broke into laughter. It seems like my analysis was wrong. Rao Rong's positioning is extremely skilled. This will be a highly anticipated solo match. Indeed, the moment Rao Rong put on his earpiece, he seemed to have transformed into a different person. As expected of the sole control of the entire team. That was probably the reason Feng Yi had chosen Rao Rong as the first player. That was because no matter what competition he was in, he would never be affected by the outside world. Time trickled by. The battle was getting more and more intense, causing everyone to be very nervous. Very soon, the Supreme Alliance members realized something. Theo wasn't a weakling. He was able to predict Rao Rong's position and deal damage. Anxiety seeped out from everyone's hearts. It was a full 10 minutes of battle. Both of them returned to the city with low HP. Soon someone noticed a problem. If this goes on, Supreme Alliance will definitely lose. What? At the end of the day, Rao Rong is best suited as a team controller. The team controller has to coordinate with his teammates to bring out his strongest side. Now that he has been placed in this position, it is obvious that Supreme Alliance wants to win this match. No, it should be said that Supreme Alliance wants to win the first two matches. It would be best if they don't engage in the last team battle with Theo because they know that with their current lineup, they won't be able to win. Hence they sent Rao Rong. In terms of speed, technique, and condition, Rao Rong is undoubtedly outstanding. After all, he is one of the three pillars along with Qin Mo and Xiao Jing. But the team controller's damage isn't high. If the battle drags on, Rao Rong will be finished. Just as he finished speaking, Yi Zichen's eyes widened. The other player was already heading towards Rao Rong. Everyone's eyes widened in shock. Just as everyone thought Rao Rong was about to be caught, he moved nimbly and turned the tables. Supreme Alliance had won this single battle. Shui Yaoyao watched from the side. She paused for a moment, then turned around and hugged Coco, who was still biting the rabbit's ear. Her happiness seemed to be contagious. Well done. When Rao Rong returned, everyone patted him on the shoulder. He lifted his lips into a smile, clearly in a good mood. But soon they realized the problem. Theo's team members were lazy, as though it didn't matter even if they lost the single match. You should be aware of Supreme Alliance's standard, Theo's captain said. The two of them stood up with a smile. The single match isn't bad, but if it's against Supreme Alliance's strongest player, Supreme Alliance will soon realize the difference in strength. Don't underestimate them, Theo's captain replied, but he didn't refute his teammates' words. The experienced shoutcaster glanced over, speaking into the microphone. I'm guessing from the start of the double match, Theo is going to unleash its true strength. Based on Theo's usual style, they would indeed use a single match to gauge their opponent's strength. Besides, they are used to placing their stronger players at the back. Supreme Alliance has to take this seriously. Supreme Alliance had to take this seriously. But it was hard to imagine how the double match would turn out. Their teamwork was flawless, their maneuvering was sharp, and they had plundered their jungle's resources at the start of the match. Before Uncle Ian and Lin Feng could work together, the jungle's resources were gone. The resources in the wilderness would be gone and the economy would suffer a huge loss. Everyone could feel Theo's menacing aura. It wasn't a one-on-one match that had lasted nearly 40 minutes. This time they were starting to reveal their true abilities. *CK. Lin Feng noticed the change in their tactics. He started to move closer to Yin Wuyao, preparing to ambush the top lane. But the opponent didn't take the bait. It was fine if they didn't take the bait. The news of the tyrant being killed appeared on the screen. The economic gap had been doubled in an instant. Lin Feng's face fell. He quickly realized that the opponent had revealed himself to divert his attention, allowing the bottom lane to focus on killing the tyrant. Such a ploy. Such a simple ploy. He actually hadn't noticed it. In reality, Lin Feng wasn't to be blamed. No one had expected the tyrant to be used so early and with a support tank. But when they saw the equipment, they realized it had been premeditated. A wild knife, specially used to deal with wild beasts. It was all part of his plan. The audience could see with their own eyes how difficult it had been for Supreme Alliance to fight the double match. After all, the difference in their economy was too great. Fortunately, Lin Feng was smarter this time. He didn't dwell on the mistake, instead he did what he had to do. The players on Theo's side raised their eyebrows when they saw this. I didn't expect him to be so composed. It seems like some information can't be fully trusted. We killed the tyrant, but he's still so composed. Supreme Alliance isn't too bad. They glanced at each other with their headphones on. With a swipe of their right hands, they vanished from the map in unison. The ordinary audience couldn't tell what was going on. However, the team that appeared in the spectator stand saw it very clearly. Supreme Alliance is going to lose the double match. When someone heard this, he subconsciously wanted to refute. But when he turned around and saw who was speaking, he felt as if his throat was blocked. Hoshino. It was actually Hoshino. Everyone knew that Hoshino's judgment was extremely accurate when it came to such matters. He seemed to be very unwilling to say this sentence. His eyes were looking at the screen and his pupils were a little black. As for the fans sitting in the audience, they could not help but shout. The Japanese. It's really the Japanese. They're so cool. That's strange, aren't they still competing? Why are they here? Wait a minute, the audience and reporters seem to be heading over. What do you mean? *CK is the Japanese over? The person watching the live stream shook his phone. It took an hour, but they only used 20 minutes to crush them. During the double match, they used 40 minutes because of Peach's recklessness. It was a best of 3 and they gave up on the last match. The person's mouth fell open. After a long moment of hesitation, he added, as expected of the Japanese. Compared to the Japanese's ease. Supreme Alliance was in a predicament. Lin Feng and Yin Wuyao weren't useless. Perhaps it was due to the opponent's strategy, but it gave off the feeling that Supreme Alliance was being suppressed by the opponent. That Lin Feng seems to have sensed something. A member of the Japanese team said. Hoshino replied, it's too late. Yes, it was too late. This was the first time Yin Wuyao realized his hand speed couldn't keep up with his thoughts. Even though their support had died twice. But this was Yin Wuyao's third death. Lin Feng wouldn't be able to win the 2 against 1. As expected, Supreme Alliance lost the double match. Even with the compliments from their opponents, Supreme Alliance didn't get excited. They knew how passive they were in this double match. Lin Feng hung his head, apologizing. I'm sorry. Yun Hu reached out to press down on his shoulder. There's nothing to be sorry about. It's my turn, aren't you going to smile at me? At this stage, everyone knew that Supreme Alliance wasn't going to be easy. The Theo team's ability could be seen from the double match. When Hoshino said that it was too late, he didn't just mean that they were late for the doubles. From the start, Supreme Alliance hadn't forced out all of Theo's abilities. Hence it was too late to continue. Besides, Supreme Alliance wasn't going to use their strongest formation for the team battle. Everyone was worried about whether Lin Chintao's jungler would be able to set up the tempo. Theo's captain smiled. Alright, since Qin Mo isn't around, stick to the original plan, destroy their jungler. That way they won't be able to retaliate. Sometimes we have to thank the spectators. Yes, they had to thank them. Chapter 1345. The shoutcasters knew what was happening, but even if they knew Supreme Alliance was in a precarious situation, they wouldn't say it out loud. They weren't newbies in international competitions. They knew better than anyone the changes in Supreme Alliance over the past few years. Perhaps some teams were destined to miss out on the championship. The professionals flipped through the information knowingly, waiting for the two teams to begin to reveal the names of the players. They had about 3 minutes to consider. After all, the team battle would decide the final victory. Time seemed to pass slowly. Lin Feng could see Feng Yi standing in the corner, seemingly at a loss for words. He probably wanted to smile at them as he lifted the corners of his lips. Unknowingly, it started to snow outside. It seemed to be the first snow in Jiang City. The snow was small, almost melting the moment it landed on his shoulders. But a child in a black down jacket stood there, staring at the ticket in his hands. He didn't move or speak. The ticketing officer didn't know what to do. Kid, aren't you cold standing there? Hurry and go home, it's the same next year. It's not the same. The child lifted his head, his cat eyes beautiful. Supreme Alliance is participating this year, the team I'm going to join. The ticketing officer stilled, his first reaction was to laugh. How old are you? Why are you thinking of gaming? No matter how old you are, underage children have to be accompanied by their parents, do you understand? As long as there's a parent. The child asked, shifting his gaze towards the skirt that was flying over. Then he walked over, standing beside the person. She is, let's go in together. The ticketing officer laughed. Kid, I'm not stupid, don't pull a passerby and say she's your parent. Passerby? The child frowned, looking adorable. She isn't a passerby. Before he could reply, the ticketing officer added, even if she isn't a passerby, only one person can enter with one ticket. Parents can wait in the resting area. Hearing that, the person frowned. He couldn't barge in because if he did, he would be disqualified. He raised his head and saw the countdown timer on the screen. It was too late for Feng Yi to come out, and this entrance was the fastest way to reach the arena. Then, brother ticket inspector, please let her in. The child turned around with his school bag on his back. It was obvious that he had a good upbringing. I'll watch from the lounge. The ticket inspector was confused again. You're not going in? Why were you so persistent just now? The woman raised her eyebrows and looked at the little bean beside her. You're willing to part with it? Yes, it doesn't matter if I go in or not, but you must go in. After the child finished speaking, he probably felt that he wasn't enthusiastic enough. After thinking for a while, he raised his hand and clenched it into a fist. All the best. Did he recognize her? Thank you. The man didn't act pretentiously. He rubbed the child's head and looked in the direction of the ticketing staff. When the ticketing officer let them through, he was still confused. After all, he really couldn't understand why the little boy in front of him would smile so sweetly when he saw the back view of that person walking in quickly. He had observed that the child had been standing there for half an hour with a paralyzed expression. Now that he had given the ticket to someone else, he was smiling? What kind of trick was this? At this moment, another child ran over from the other side. He looked similar to the one in the black down jacket and asked mysteriously, why aren't you going in yet? I even wore a dress for you. You don't know how nervous I was when Dad looked at me just now. MOB F***CK paralyzed little face, what are you smiling about? Brother. What? What was wrong with his sister today? I gave the ticket to someone else. Is that something to be happy about? Softer, Dad and Mom are nearby. No, why did you give the ticket to someone else? Because, The ticketing officer perked up his ears, but before he could hear it clearly, a commotion came from the screen behind him. It was time for the match. The host smiled as he turned the microphone over. All right, the members of both teams have decided on their team members for the team battle. Supreme Alliance has Yunhu, Coco, Shuiyaoyao, and, just as the shoutcaster was about to announce Lin Chintao's name, there was a loud swoosh. It wasn't just the host, even the shoutcasters turned to look over. What's going on? The stage control was about to signal when the director held onto his wrist. He gestured for the staff to move the camera over. At the entrance, a person walked over slowly. The first thing that caught everyone's attention was the black skirt. Following that, the team uniform draped over her shoulders fluttered in the wind, creating a loud sound as the two words were blown out. She was still holding a ticket in her hand. Her hair was messy, but it didn't affect the beauty that she exuded. She glanced up, following the host's words with a light chuckle. And Spade Z. In an instant, the entire bird's nest was silent. The sound seemed to have stopped at that moment. Everyone felt as if their acupoints had been poked, and they were frozen in place. It wasn't just because of her appearance. It was also because she was wearing female clothing. However, the person under the spotlight didn't seem to notice their reactions. She smiled. Our captain isn't here today, so I will be leading Supreme Alliance. Almighty Z, we support you. What's the meaning of wearing female clothing? Is she here to apologize? Ignore what they say, focus on the competition. Swoosh. The crowd was out of control. It had been quiet before, but now there was a huge uproar. There were so many voices that it wasn't possible to identify them. The click rate soared. They couldn't tell anything from the crowd. However, there were more than 1,000 comments in a second. F***CK, what did I just see? My Almighty is wearing female clothing. Almighty Z is so beautiful. Demoness attack. My big spade. I feel like I'm falling in love with someone else. What should I do? Is my hubby that handsome today? Female clothing. I'm drooling. Please give my Almighty some screen time. Female clothing. Screenshot. I want a screenshot. There are so many scenes. It wasn't that there weren't any negative comments, but that person just stood there as if she didn't hear anything. Her long dress matched her battle uniform, her eyes were clear, and her side profile was extremely beautiful. The smile at the corner of her mouth made every fan feel that it was familiar, but also different. In the past, she was a mischievous youngster. Her laughter was seductive. Now, people couldn't describe that feeling. But when a few true Spade fans saw her walk to the exit zone, for some reason, they grabbed onto their best friend's hand and burst into tears. It wasn't because they were sad, but because they were touched. They knew very well why she had specially worn a dress. In order to make sure that there wasn't a single part of the competition that people couldn't hold on to. Just as she said, she stood there, clean and innocent. Lin Feng wanted to hug her, but he retracted his hand. He could clearly hear his words. F***CK, after changing into a dress, I can't bear to do it. I suddenly feel like a beast. Boju reached out and pulled him back. She hugged him with one hand and patted his back coolly. You're a submissive, you don't have to feel such a burden. Good sister, I'll help you win it back later. Sister? Me? Sister? Lin Feng pointed at her before pointing at himself. He turned to look at Feng Yi. Feng Yi smiled, a relaxed smile that seemed to be reflecting light in his eyes. It seems like I can retire as the temporary leader. With that, he walked towards the committee, speaking in a low voice. The three of them nodded and gestured to the host. All right. The host turned towards the camera. In the nick of time, Supreme Alliance's spiritual jungler, Spade Z, has returned. Hence, they have made some adjustments to their lineup. Supreme Alliance's team members are Spade Z, Yunhu, Lin Chintao, Coco, and Shuiyaoyao. As for Theo's team members, they are... No one was listening to the host anymore. Everyone's gaze was on the person who was about to enter the arena. The number of views online had exceeded 100 million. The director knew what the people in front of the computer wanted to see. Hence, the camera remained glued to Bojio's face. She actually dressed up as a girl. The Japanese had the same reaction. Watanabe scratched his head in frustration. What I want to say is, will I really lose to a girl like me? Why does she look so annoying when she's dressed as a boy? But now that she's dressed as a girl, how am I supposed to play in the future? I'll pity her. Vice Captain, what do you mean by that? Hoshino didn't look at him. His gaze seemed to be fixated on a certain point ever since she had appeared. Even the smile on his face seemed gentler. Watanabe stilled, grabbing his hair again. I seem to have accidentally found out a secret. Oh. Shin arched a brow, a nonchalant smile on his face. What secret did you find out? Watanabe jumped. Captain, as someone with experience, look at Vice Captain's expression when he looks at Spade Z. It's obvious he has something to say. Also, he has never been interested in any team in the past but has always been interested in Supreme Alliance. I used to think it was because of Supreme Alliance's skills, but now, it seems like he already knew Spade Z was a girl. Captain, if Supreme Alliance wins this match, will Vice Captain go easy on Spade Z tomorrow? But I won't be able to bear to lay my hands on such a beautiful girl. Can't bear to lay your hands on her? Shin laughed viciously. Then you can wait for her to kill you. Watanabe shuddered. For some reason, his captain's smile seemed especially cold. The competition is starting. I wonder how Spade Z is going to play this time? A voice came from the audience. Let's watch. That sentence reflected the Theo team's current mood. They had done their research on Spade Z. After all, she was a dark horse in this year's esports scene. They had done a lot of research on her videos and had a thorough understanding of them. From the way she played, they couldn't tell that she was a girl. When the news had first been released, they had been shocked. Now that they had seen her in person, they looked back at themselves. Did Supreme Alliance pick their members based on their looks? Why were they all so beautiful? But regardless, their strategy wouldn't change. They would destroy the opposing jungler. Besides, according to tradition, Spade Z would probably choose an assassin with an invisibility ability. That was the conclusion they came to from the data. It wasn't just the Theo team. Even the fans who were familiar with Spade Z's playstyle were waiting for the assassin who had helped Spade Z obtain numerous first clears to appear. However, no one would have thought that something would happen. She had actually chosen another character in the game. That is, Almighty Chin's destined hero. There was a smacking sound. Bojio held onto the mouse and clicked confirm. She raised her hands and placed the earpiece over her head. She didn't know if it was because she was wearing a dress, but she looked especially fair today. Her slender fingers were almost transparent under the light. On the countdown timer, the shoutcaster explained the situation. To prevent the competition from being boring, the shoutcaster explained, "Honestly, I'm surprised by Spade Z's choice of character." What? Do you think she isn't good? It isn't bad. Everyone knows that she is an all-round player, but in terms of proficiency, she doesn't seem to have much experience. Indeed, Chinemo has always been the one using it. Alright, enough talking. From the screen, we can all see that the members of both teams have already walked out of the spring. Wait a minute. MMH. Theo seems to have an idea. The screen zoomed in. The crowd clearly saw two figures behind Theo dashing across the jungle and the river. The ones in charge of guarding the middle and top lane were leaning slightly towards the jungle. They're planning to ambush us. That's right, this stance. It wasn't to negate Supreme Alliance's blue buff but to outflank Supreme Alliance's jungler, Spade Z. Rao Rong's pupils constricted. Even he, who had fought one-on-one with Theo before, did not expect them to have such a fighting style, let alone those who had just entered the arena. This was completely different from their previous conservative style. F***ck can't be? Why are they playing so high? The audience couldn't help but admit that such an opening made them even more eager to watch. After all, Supreme Alliance hadn't noticed anything yet. They were all fighting for their finances. According to the usual playstyle, the more money one had, the stronger one's attack. From their perspective, there wasn't anything amiss. The more it was like this, the more it meant a message. Chapter 1346. The moment the thought entered their minds, a loud click came from the screen. Theo's tank had a stun effect. With a swing of his hammer, Bojio froze on the spot. Everyone who played the game knew that control was the most important thing for an assassin. If she was controlled, she wouldn't be able to escape. Besides, there was a tank and a long-range attack. After the signal to attack, the opponent's sorcerer had rushed over to provide support. In an instant, Spade Z's HP dropped by half. She didn't even need to fight in the wilderness. Theo's assassin seemed to have been waiting for this moment. He raised his long spear and leaped in, intending to deal all the damage to her. Right at this moment, Bojio moved her right hand. Bojio sat in front of the screen and moved her right hand. The mouse glowed and everyone could see the lines that appeared in that instant. She moved with agility, avoiding the big move. Theo's assassin missed his target. But even so, Spade Z was still in a dangerous situation. Moreover, under normal circumstances as an assassin when fighting in a high-level match, He should be prepared in advance to see if the other party would come over to attack him. Not only had they been robbed, but they had also been forced into such a corner by Theo. Some started to wonder if Spade Z's abilities had deteriorated. Her mana has been snatched and she's suffering from the start. Spade Z's maneuvers just now are too average. Some of the audience who already thought Bojio was a drama queen, seized the opportunity to mock her. With such skills she can't lead a team. Since she left she shouldn't have come back. Seriously, the tickets are a waste. I don't want to watch such a boring match. Unlike the audience, the fans were really anxious. They leaned forward worried for Bojio. On the screen her HP was getting lower and lower. It can't be. Was Spade Z, the FC King, going to sacrifice the first HP in the team battle? Spade Z's fans are going to be slapped in the face. Everyone's attention was focused on the magnified screen. The director had also focused on the main scene. Since Spade Z was the focus of everyone's attention, it would be more exciting to watch the match from her point of view. Hence, the discussion grew louder. Even the bullet screen was filled with comments. After all, this was the scene being broadcasted. But soon enough, the veteran esports fans noticed a problem. Why wasn't anyone helping Spade Z? Supreme Alliance wasn't at this level. Even if Shui Yaoyao was a newbie and didn't know how to support. But what about the others? Was this Spade Z's commanding skills? You don't even send a signal when you encounter a problem? Isn't he a little too arrogant? It seemed like Spade Z was only suited for individual battles and wasn't suited for team battles. It was a pity that Rao Rong had already represented Supreme Alliance during the 1v1. If Rao Rong had been the commander, the outcome might have been different. Just as this thought popped up in everyone's mind, they felt that Supreme Alliance's jungler was about to collapse. Suddenly, a sound effect appeared on the screen. Go. The first blood? Strange. On the screen, Spade Z wasn't dead. Then why would there be such a sound effect? All of a sudden, everyone was puzzled and perplexed. They didn't understand what was going on. Soon the big screen gave the answer. It was the support on the other side of Theo who was only planning to reinforce the troops. Heavens! It wasn't just the audience that was in disbelief. Even Theo's captain was shocked. How did this happen? In an instant, the situation turned chaotic. Bojio, who was sitting in front of the computer, slid her right hand and moved nimbly. She retreated to the bottom of the turret with a low amount of HP, just in time to feed herself a blood pack. But this was not the point. The point was that people could clearly hear the 3 words spitting out from her thin lips. All right, retreat. The next second the bullet screen went crazy. F***CK, what exactly is going on? Please explain. I can't believe my ears. Was my big Spade giving an order? The netizens weren't the only ones who had this question. Even the audience was confused. When the replay was shown, the audience realized that Spade Z hadn't been caught in the jungle. That was when they realized that Spade Z hadn't been ambushed. Instead, she had sensed the opponent's intentions beforehand and had sent a signal to the entire team to attack Theo's support. Hence, when the opponent had come to their jungle, she hadn't reacted on purpose. She had wanted Theo to take the bait and assumed that she had been controlled. That way they would focus on killing her or guarding against reinforcements. However, they hadn't expected that they would be hiding in the bushes to ambush the support. F***CK, this trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain is too good. She didn't just take the first HP, the entire jungle on Theo's right is empty. My almighty Z is telling the opponent that if he dares to use his blue, I'll get my teammate to take the first HP and clear his entire jungle? That's amazing. It was indeed unexpected. No one had expected such an outcome. If one thought about it carefully, one would realize that such a plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain was not something that just anyone could pull off. Firstly, one had to be clear of the opponent's intentions and make a certain level of judgment. Next, one had to have precise positioning to ensure that one would be able to buy time for one's teammate and ensure that one wouldn't die. It was a difficult feat that not many could pull off. So cool. That was so cool. The people who had been mocking her kept their mouths shut after witnessing this scene. They were clear on one point. It wasn't that Spade Z's fans had been slapped in the face, but they had been too biased. This seems to be the first time Spade Z has used such a method to start a match. The shoutcaster was a professional. It's novel and impressive. The other person chuckled. Indeed, I'm not sure if you have noticed, but she has completely adapted to her role as a team leader. Using such a method to take the first HP is in consideration of the overall situation. She is now an assassin and also a team controller. I don't know why, but I can see Qin Mo's shadow in her. Honestly, if I were to participate in a match now, they would be the opponents I wouldn't want to face. They are too strong, be it individual battles or assisting the team. In the past, Spade Z's advantage in this aspect hadn't been revealed yet. I reckon Theo's side wouldn't have expected her to use such a method, using herself as bait to allow the team to take the first HP. This is completely different from the way she used to sweep the opponent's jungle alone. It wasn't just different, it was a huge blow to Theo's head. But this alone wasn't enough to secure victory. After all, Theo's skills were obvious. But it had to be said that the mistake in strategy was a huge blow to them. They couldn't stay in Supreme Alliance's jungle any longer. One of the towers in the bottom lane had been destroyed and they had to return quickly. Shui Yao Yao from Supreme Alliance's middle lane and the experienced Yun who had already gathered over. Hence they had to flee. Right at this moment, the figure that was supposed to be under the tower suddenly darted over. She cut off the backline sorcerer that was trying to retreat. K.O. Dumbfounded. Everyone was dumbfounded. They hadn't expected Spade Z to rush out with less than half of her HP. Wasn't she courting death? Even if she killed someone, she wouldn't be able to escape. Theo's reaction was swift. Just as he was about to destroy the other party, the figure held a wine flask and with a flash of her sword, she was back under the tower. First skill, displacement. *CK, that maneuver is amazing. That's the true meaning of first blood. Is my big spade learning from Almighty Qin? He retreated instantly after killing someone. The crowd was getting out of control. They had never seen it before. In the Asian Cup, China had never achieved such an amazing result. This time, even some of the haters were silenced. They couldn't be haters. Her maneuvers were too heaven-defying. The atmosphere on Theo's side was starting to change. They had assumed that with the information they had, they could deal with Supreme Alliance. It was the same even if Spade Z was around. But now, they realized that the information they had was just information. Because when they truly competed against Supreme Alliance, they would realize how fast they were growing. Moreover, Spade Z was an assassin that no one could predict when or how she would strike. A second ago, when they thought she wasn't fast enough, they realized she was just bait and wouldn't move recklessly. The next second, she dared to attack with half of her HP, using her recovery skill to kill someone. Theo was really feeling the pressure. Their captain changed his style as he turned to the side and said something to the rest of the team. It was obvious that Theo's strategy had changed. They started to play steadily, ensuring that their jungle resources weren't taken by Spade Z. Next, they took a kill in the middle lane, pulling the score from 2-0 to 2-1. Gradually, everyone began to fully immerse themselves in the match. They were evenly matched. That was the mood of the spectators. At this stage, it will depend on who is more skilled. Yu Cixin placed his hands behind his back, whistling devilishly before his voice deepened. But I'm curious why Qin Mo isn't participating in such a competition. Even if he lost his memory, he shouldn't be absent. Hoshino tilted his head. What are you trying to say? Chapter 1347. Their captain left. The rest of the Japanese would definitely follow. Watanabe watched Yu Cixin's back view before turning towards them. Vice Captain, you guys can leave first, I'll take a look. Hoshino lifted his thin lips, a smile that was hard to reject. The more Watanabe thought about it, the more interested his vice captain was in Spade Z. His interest was way out of line. There was no love in the esports industry. But judging from his vice captain's intentions, Watanabe shook his head, his expression unreadable. Hoshino didn't seem to mind the misunderstanding from his teammates, his gaze fixed on Bojio the entire time. The battle on the screen continued to be intense. But when the screen switched to Bojio, everyone saw her sharp reflexes, the numerous strategies she devised, the way she predicted Theo's movements and swiftly provided support. She didn't just command the battle, she would also cut the backline at the most crucial moment to take down the enemy. But Theo wasn't weak either, he never suffered any losses in the team battle. Spade Z took down one of their members. They only took one Supreme Alliance member. The team battle went on for more than 50 minutes. In the last match, Theo was still thinking about how to counter Bojio's predictions. Unexpectedly this time, Bojio didn't make any predictions. Instead, she used her best playstyle, leaping in and taking down all the attackers, exchanging 1 for 3. After the explosive damage, Theo didn't have an ADC, sorcerer or top laner. How was he going to continue? Supreme Alliance pushed forward, destroying Theo's Crystal City. The screen zoomed in. Everyone saw her removing her headphones, wearing a dress as she picked up a bottle of mineral water. They won. She wasn't just the assassin, she was also the leader of Supreme Alliance. Everyone knew very well that this last exchange of 1 for 3 was worth it. It was just like Almighty Qin's thinking. Soon, everyone's results appeared on the screen. Spade Z, the MVP of the match. Many Negroes were speechless at this moment. Other than Qin Mo, none of the other Chinese players had achieved such results. Spade Z was the first. Both inside and outside the stadium, there was a huge commotion. After 3 years, this was the closest the Chinese team was to the championship. The media couldn't hold it in any longer, wanting to interview Bo Jiu the most. The audience cheered too. Other than Shui Yaoyao, no one knew how pale the person beside her was. Just now, when she was commanding the battle, her hand accidentally touched her. Shui Yaoyao froze at that moment because the body temperature was too high. It was so high that she was in a daze. Ines Jiu was having a fever. That was her first reaction. But before she could do anything, that person's voice came, "Don't leave the middle lane, Yaoyao, don't be distracted." Shui Yaoyao could only focus because she knew that the sooner the competition ended, the more rest he could get. Perhaps, other than this group of teammates, no one would know under what circumstances this battle command was completed. Looking at the increasing number of people, the man raised his head to drink water and lowered his arms. Shui Yaoyao stood in front of her. Bo Jiu knew she was running a fever since even her breath was hot. That was why she kept drinking water. When she saw Shui Yaoyao's actions, she smiled. "It's fine, I can handle it. Leave the media to Boss Phone." Shui Yaoyao took a moment before adding, "You can walk from the back, Coco will follow you." Coco didn't know what had happened. He was extremely happy after winning the competition, his face full of smiles. Shui Yaoyao had already sent Feng Yi a message. When Feng Yi saw it, he immediately gestured to his assistant and blocked the crowd that was approaching. "Friends from the media, I know everyone wants to get the first-hand interview information. Don't be anxious, there will be a chance as long as everyone comes one by one." With that, he gestured behind him to lead her away. Shui Yaoyao didn't delay, blocking the crowd with Coco and taking the chance to bring Bo Jiu backstage to Supreme Alliance's lounge. "Fever?" Coco's handsome face was distorted. "How did you get a fever?" Bo Jiu didn't explain, she just smiled and opened the wardrobe, removing her uniform. She seemed to be taking Lin Feng's black down jacket. "No, little Spade, you're burning up, where are you going?" Coco pressed her down, his face stern. "Don't go anywhere, wait for old Fox Feng to come over and take you to the hospital for an injection." Bo Jiu pushed his hand away. "It's just a small cold, I have something to do." "What do you have?" Coco looked as though he wouldn't let her go no matter what. What a joke, he could feel the heat through her clothes. "Where did you go yesterday? How did you end up like this?" Bo Jiu took another sip of water to clear her mind. "I didn't go anywhere." Actually, Coco knew something must have happened yesterday. At the start, Captain had said he was going to buy candies for Little Spade and then he disappeared. Little Spade had gone to look for Captain but hadn't returned the entire night. The next time she had appeared, she was alone. Coco didn't ask where Captain was because he was afraid it would upset Little Spade. But how did she end up like this? Could it be? "You didn't sleep the entire night?" Coco's eyes widened. Bo Jiu paused but didn't reply. She reached for the black mask beside her, preparing to wear it so that she wouldn't be recognized. Coco watched her, knowing that his guess was right. His eyes widened, but he didn't know that his guess was only half right. Bo Jiu hadn't slept the entire night, she had stood downstairs for an hour so that he could see her. In order to prevent any blemishes from the competition, she had worn a long dress that wasn't warm at all. Perhaps no one would ever be able to see her good intentions. Only friends could empathize with her. Shui Yaoyao stood at the side, lifting her face. She was afraid she would cry because her heart was really aching. Coco wanted to call Feng Yi because he was the only one who could persuade Little Spade to go for the injection. But when that person reached out and held onto his wrist saying, "Coco, I have to go now, I have to go to Brother Mo's place before I lose him again," he couldn't make the call no matter how hard he tried. He knew he shouldn't stop her. Bo Jiu smiled. With the mask on, only her dark eyes could be seen. The long black down jacket covered her figure perfectly. She wasn't acting out a drama, Bo Jiu knew she had to get better. But the more she walked, the heavier her breathing became. It was only when she stopped that she realized her body couldn't handle the high fever. Gradually, the voices in his ears became indistinct. All he could hear was more and more noise, as if the media had barged in. At this moment, she heard a voice from the other side. "Hoshino. It's Hoshino, why is he here?" Hoshino glanced at them, reaching over with one hand, silently tossing a bottle of medicine over. Bojio caught it, watching as he stood there, intentionally shielding her. She turned and walked towards the emergency exit. The media wasn't aware of her actions since Hoshino was a hot topic. All their attention was on his face. Hoshino smiled faintly as he answered the reporter's questions. When Feng Yi walked over, he nodded, stuffing a hand into his pocket, brushing past him. Feng Yi was a smart man, he could tell with one look that Hoshino had taken over his job. The two of them walked towards the lounge together. When there was no one around, Feng Yi said, "Thank you." Hoshino paused, breaking into a smile. "It's nothing. From the information I received, Hoshino isn't someone who would do such a small thing." Feng Yi was indeed the smiling prince. Hoshino was still as elegant as ever. "It seems like Boss Feng's information is wrong. I'm a caring person. Besides, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's competition. I wouldn't want my opponent to be held back by such trivial matters." "Just an opponent?" Feng Yi didn't beat around the bush, going straight to the point. Hoshino lifted his lips. "Seems like everyone knows I like Z. That's right, she isn't just an opponent, she's my family." "Family?" Feng Yi didn't understand. He had assumed that Hoshino's actions were all because of love. But the moment he said the word family, Feng Yi wasn't sure. At the same time, in a building in the west of the city, Fan Jia started the countdown. There were 4 hours left. The person in front of her belonged to her. But there was something that made Fan Jia frown. Since this morning, he had been standing in front of the window without saying a word. No matter what she said, he would only reply with 1 or 2 words. Sometimes he wouldn't even speak. Fan Jia hated this situation. The more she thought about it, the more she realized why he was standing there. Who was he looking at but didn't see? She clenched her fists, testing his reaction again. She could tell that he would do everything she said. Fan Jia was happy again. Just as she was about to leave, she saw him looking out of the window. There was actually a taxi parked there. The person who got out of the taxi was wearing a knee-length black down jacket. He raised his head and looked in their direction. Then he strolled over to the Lamborghini that he had never driven away before. Fan Jia didn't know it was her at first. But she noticed the glint in Qin Mo's eyes the moment she appeared. Fan Jia was really jealous. She was standing right in front of him. But he didn't even look at her. She had assumed that was his personality. But now it seemed like it wasn't enough? Then she would end everything prematurely. Fan Jia's gaze darkened, meeting the figure outside the window. Bojio wasn't aware of the situation upstairs. She couldn't keep standing outside since she had to consider her health. Hence, her first reaction was to get into the car. When little Blackie heard her voice, he immediately said, "Master, your little vixen is still upstairs, she hasn't come down. Don't worry." Bojio felt much more at ease after reaching here. But now, she wasn't worried about the Almighty leaving. Instead, she was worried about the time. The time was getting closer and she couldn't think of a better way to help the Almighty regain his memory. Bojio tugged open her collar, leaned her head against the steering wheel and drank a fever pill. But even then, the AI system in the car detected her high body temperature. Little Blackie's voice rang again. "Master, the report shows that your stamina has reached its limit. As the Fifth Avenue's racing god, I have to use my professional knowledge to inform you that you need treatment. Oh, why isn't Grandfather Butler around? If he was around, he wouldn't allow you to act so recklessly." Bojio didn't reply, maintaining her position. Little Blackie started to panic, flashing its lights continuously so that someone could see it. It was sending a signal. Upstairs, Chinamo stood in front of the window. He had thought that after that person appeared, he would soon see that face that made him feel peaceful for some reason. 5 minutes passed, but she was still in the car. Chinamo tapped the side of his long legs, feeling uneasy. He wanted to head downstairs. Fan Jia noticed the change in his emotions, chuckling lightly. "Brother Mo, where are you going? Who's going to protect me after you leave? They are still watching me. The moment you leave, I don't know if there will be snipers shooting." These words were indeed effective. Because Chinamo had one hand in his pocket and he stopped there. But his heart and actions were far apart. It would definitely hurt. The moment Chinamo paused, his chest felt as though it was being torn apart. He leaned against the wall, his fingers gripping the amulet, as though that was the only way to alleviate the pain. Seeing this, Fan Jia wanted to take the chance to take the amulet away. She hated this amulet to the core. Besides, this was Chinmo's weakest moment. The last thing he relied on was gone. He probably wouldn't be paying attention to Z like before. With this thought in mind, Fan Jia reached her hand out and added a voice message. Brother Mo, are you feeling unwell? I know this is a gift from me and it's very important. I'll keep it safe for you. You'll break it. Qin Mo's eyes turned bloodshot. He wanted to move his hand several times, but there was always a voice telling him not to hurt the person in front of him, to protect her. That voice was like a curse, imprinting itself in his mind. Fan Jia saw this and knew that the last step of the hypnosis was about to be completed. She smiled, wanting to take the amulet away. But just at the moment when she let his hand leave the amulet, he was shocked. She didn't know why his hand was raised. There was a tearing sound. Chapter 1348. When she had heard the tearing sound, Fan Jia had been secretly delighted. She had finally gotten rid of this thing. But when she saw the thing on the ground, her expression changed. It was a photo. The photo should have been taken with a Polaroid. The colors were bright. In the photo, the sun was shining brightly. A little girl wearing a tiger costume was pouncing towards a little boy. She was smiling beautifully as though she had been dipped in sugar. The little boy was very cold and his expression was hard to describe. However, he reached out and held the little girl's waist, as if he was afraid that she would touch him, or afraid that she would fall on her own. Even the corners of his mouth were slightly pursed, but it was not because he hated her, but because he felt a little helpless. His eyes were filled with tenderness. It was easy to think of an ancient Chinese poem. The first time a concubine's hair touched her forehead, the drama of folding flowers in front of the door. Her husband rode a bamboo horse, circling the bed to play with green plums. In reality, this wasn't the main point of the photo. Under the photo there was a beautiful sentence written in block letters. If God exists, I hope this idiot wearing a tiger costume can live a peaceful and happy life. So this amulet, from the day he had gotten it, hadn't been for him to pray for his own blessings. All these years, the treasure he had kept with him was for another person's blessings. In that instant, Fan Jia was filled with hatred. Her first reaction was to destroy the photo. But that slender, fair hand was one step ahead of her, pressing down on the photo, allowing her to raise her leg and step on his index finger. Fan Jia had used a lot of strength. It was impossible for it not to hurt, but Qin Mo didn't even blink. His handsome side profile was still in the dim light. It was as though the little girl in the photo was the only thing left in his eyes. His fingers slid down the tiger hat on her head, and something in his heart seemed to melt. He could almost hear the sound of a lock being unlocked. He was most afraid of losing this person. The scene in the photo seemed to have been imbued with a sense of perspective. Scene after scene it flashed across his mind. She pounced over and hugged him. Momo, how much for a kilo? I'll buy you. She refused to go home and sleep, hugging her little keyboard. This is my favorite toy, I'll give it to you. Let me sleep for one night, just one night. She was very obedient when she laid on his bed. It was hard to imagine that someone as troublesome as her would be obedient. She would always lean over in the end. If I hug you, you won't want to go back to China anymore. Yeah, what I mean is, you don't have to miss home so much. He had fallen sick, but even his grandfather hadn't noticed. She was the only one who had hugged him. She didn't cry and went to look for the family doctor. After he caught a cold, he was afraid that she would be infected, so he deliberately placed a lot of flower pots by the window to prevent her from coming again. However, even the gods could not stop the little tiger. She had to climb in with a black face. She spent a lot of effort to educate him. You can't treat your little friend like this. She found all sorts of reasons to sleep with him. Every time they ate, she would give him what he liked. Whatever he liked, he would definitely see her bring it over the next day. Even though her grandfather didn't know what he was interested in, she knew it clearly. The way she smiled, the way her eyes turned red, the way she would press him against the wall after she grew up, the way her lips curved slightly. She had never been anyone. She had always been that idiot who had treated him as a girl. Fan Jia sensed his abnormality. She wanted to speak, trying to use words to hypnotize him. But what she didn't expect was that before she could open her mouth, swoosh, a poker card flew over, cutting her face sharply. Fan Jia's face turned pale. She watched as the person stood up slowly with the photo. Even her eyes were trembling. She couldn't believe it. No one could decipher the hypnosis. This was impossible, absolutely impossible. But the coldness emitted from the man made Fan Jia truly feel fear. The poker card in his fingertips slashed at her again. This time it cut her wrist. Fan Jia had never been so close to death. She could tell that he really wanted to kill her. The moment he walked out of the light, Fan Jia knew that she was doomed. That wasn't the gaze of someone who was controlled by hypnosis. Instead, he used to be cold, aloof and aloof. Fanja took a few steps back. To her he wasn't a god but a devil. The way he looked at her did not have a single trace of warmth. It was as cold as when he had first exposed her. His indifferent tone was as cold as when he had first exposed her. You want to imitate her? That time, Fanja had almost been unable to escape. Because of that she hated Z even more. She had thought of many ways to kill her. But that person had always been like this, haunting her like a ghost. Fanja gritted her teeth and took a deep breath. I did everything because I like you. Why can't you pity me? Chinmo's voice was calm. After killing someone and snatching their things, you still say you are pitiful? Why should I give my pity to someone who isn't even comparable to a beast? Fanja reached out and covered her ears. I just like you. How can you say that? Do you want to say that you are innocent? Chinmo rotated the poker card in his hand slowly. Fanja raised her hand. Am I wrong? You can go to hell and ask those who died because of you. Aren't they all innocent? Chinmo moved. The sound of another poker card rang out. Fanjia's other wrist was also cut. She suddenly realized that both her hands were going to be crippled. How can you be so ruthless? Fanjia's face twisted. Why don't you just kill me? Chinmo lifted his eyelids. My hands are only for killing. You aren't worthy. When Fanja heard the last sentence she seemed to have gone crazy. But right at this moment, Chinmo gestured towards the outside. A group of plainclothes policemen rushed in from the outside. He reached out and pressed her down. Fanja struggled. Kill me if you can, kill me. Life in prison suits you better than if I kill you. Chinmo glanced sideways, his eyes cold. Don't worry, you won't die and you won't come out. Don't you like to drown? Try it in prison. Fanjia's expression changed. She understood what he meant. He wanted her to experience death every day. He had crippled her arms so that she wouldn't be able to fight back in prison. What kind of place was prison? It was a place where people were eaten without spitting out the bones. Fanja must have cried too much. One of the plainclothes men shook his head. That's quite pitiful. Chinmo tilted his head and glanced over. Do you find her pitiful? I just think that the murderer is pitiful. Since she is already dead, why should she pay with her life? Do you know the difference between humans and beasts? Humans have hearts and understand why the spirits in heaven feel uneasy. They also understand what it means to repay a debt of blood with blood. If you really find her pitiful, let me give you my blessings. I hope that no one will avenge you when the person closest to you is thrown into the sea. The plainclothes man glared, turning to retort. However, he realized that the person was dressed in a military uniform. It was young Master Tang. It was young Master Tang, smiling brightly as usual. I didn't know. Nowadays, people in the system take the victim's place and say that the murderer is pitiful. Fanja has killed many people, including our comrades. If you are worried about her life in prison, you can pack your things and move to prison. You can still take care of her. Isn't that great? The plainclothes man froze. When he saw that the side profile didn't look like he was joking, cold sweat drenched his entire back. Chinmo stood in front of young Master Tang. Both of them were tall and slender, but one of them was in a military uniform while the other was in a trench coat. Their styles were completely different. In front of them, Fanjia's methods couldn't be used at all. I have something on. Chinmo glanced up, speaking to young Master Tang. I can't go back with you. He knew it. Young Master Tang reached out, caressing his temples. How many days? After the Asian Cup. Chinmo's voice didn't change. Young Master Tang arched a brow. You know I'm in charge of this case. If it had been someone else, he wouldn't have reacted in such a manner. Who else would want to arrest me other than you? Chinmo's tone sounded as though he was talking about the weather. Young Master Tang laughed. Young Master Chin, you are mistaken. Do I look like someone who would kick someone when they are down? Chinmo was nonchalant, but his gaze was fixed on young Master Tang. Young Master Tang seems to have misunderstood yourself. His gaze didn't escape young Master Tang's eyes. Besides, Chinmo didn't intend to hide it. Forget it, just treat it as my gift to Z's dowry. Young Master Tang moved to the left and opened up a path. At the same time, the plainclothes officers also put away their guns. Fanja didn't want to be locked up in jail, she would rather die. But there was always reincarnation. Just like what young Master Tang had said, someone had to do something for the souls who had died unjustly, for those who had their possessions taken away to receive justice. Of course, selfish people would always find excuses for themselves. They would distort the truth and lie. When they were young, they would claim other people's possessions as their own in order to gain attention. When they grew up, they could live with a clear conscience even after causing someone's death. Anyway, they would be forgiven after a long time. Anyway, there would be a whole bunch of people who would offend them. But similarly, in this world, there would always be a group of people who knew to be in awe. Just like what Mandela had said, if the sky was dark, they would survive in the dark. If they didn't have the strength to shine, they would curl up in the corner. Don't defend the darkness just because you are used to it. Don't be proud of yourself. Don't mock those who are braver and more passionate than you. We can be as lowly as dust but not as twisted as maggots. The sky would always brighten, no matter how dark it used to be. In the past, Bojio wouldn't have believed this, because when she was alone it was too hard. No one could understand what she was saying, much less understand why she was disappointed. But in the end, there would always be someone who would hug her gently when she was sad, asking her in a low voice, "Are you an idiot?" Bojio felt that she would never be able to find such a person, so venomous and gentle. She had thought about it many times. A pure white person couldn't be a light source. Because they were too weak, they couldn't withstand the slightest wave. Unlike that person who was like the Kunlun Mountains. Not only could he light up the lights, but he could also create the shadows of the sun and moon. Hence she liked him so much. Bojio knew that she was losing consciousness. She leaned her head against the steering wheel, feeling a little angry. Just as she was about to move, she realized that the car door had been pulled open. The next moment, there was a slightly cold embrace. Bojio couldn't open her eyes, but her nose worked. The familiar peppermint and tobacco scent made her feel that she was in a daze from the fever. That was why she had the illusion of being hugged. Or perhaps she missed someone too much. That was what Bojio told herself. Her forehead was pressed against a slightly cold object. The next moment he hugged her tighter. Before she could figure out what was going on, a familiar voice came from beside her ear. A familiar voice entered her ears. "Little Bojio." "Mamich?" He was calling her name. "Are you an idiot?" Chinamo was angry at himself. Since he had regained his memory, of course he knew why she had such a high fever. He leaned forward and touched her forehead. His chest felt like it was being burned by the temperature. Bojio frowned. She didn't want to be called an idiot when she was sick. Besides, was it really the Almighty? No matter how she thought about it, it didn't seem possible. With that thought in mind, she wanted to move. However, someone was one step ahead of her and pressed her hand down, trapping her in a warm embrace. As if afraid that she would be frozen, the person pulled her hand and stuffed it into his clothes. Her palm was pressed against his skin, and her fingertips were no longer cold. Bojio didn't see his face. She didn't know that the high and mighty young Master Chin was using such a method to warm her up. The only person who knew was the Lamborghini little Blackie. It really couldn't see anymore. What surprised it was that the devil usually looked cold and didn't smell like a human. He actually used such a method to warm up his master. It must be cold outside. He grabbed her hand and stuffed it into his clothes. It was to make his master feel better. F***ck, even it believed that the devil had true love for its master. It was indeed true love. Because faintly there was a soft, faint voice. "I'm sorry." Chapter 1349. It was hard to imagine the almighty devil apologizing. Little Black felt that it was frightened. The intelligence system's ripples were a little shaky. "Little Blackie." Suddenly he was called. The car paused, pretending to be unresponsive. Chinamo reached over and placed Bojio on the passenger seat. He held the steering wheel with one hand and arched a brow. "Are you intending for me to pour a bucket of water on your car?" Little Blackie couldn't pretend anymore. He turned on the lights immediately. Chinmo's voice was calm. "Find the nearest hospital. Lock onto the hospital now, straight line distance." Before Little Blackie could finish his sentence, the Lamborghini sped towards the asphalt road like the wind. It was uncomfortable to have a fever. Especially the joints like the knee, it was especially sore. The fever spread from the inside out. She felt cold and hot all over. Bojio's consciousness wasn't clear. The Lamborghini didn't stop at a large hospital. It wasn't dark yet and there would definitely be a lot of people. It was a clean and large clinic in a small district. It looked high-end and the equipment was complete. But at this hour, it was either a child or an elderly person. It was rare to see someone carrying a person in. But probably because of Chinmo's height, the person in his arms didn't seem sick. Instead, she seemed to be asleep, wrapped in his jacket. The medical staff couldn't help but glance over. After all, they might see handsome people occasionally, but this was the first time they saw someone with such an aura. He was cold and aloof, but he was very polite. But what was surprising was that ever since he entered, he hadn't put the person in his arms down. He even took the thermometer from the nurse and turned to take the youngster's temperature. 39 degrees, the fever is quite severe. The nurse glanced at the thermometer. It's best to do a blood test to see if there's any inflammation. Chinemo replied. He carried Bojio and walked to the window on the second floor. During the blood test he had to give her an injection. But Bojio refused to extend her hand. Chinemo looked at her furrowed brows, kissed her palm and said, "Be good." That familiar voice probably had an effect. Bojio loosened her grip and the blood test was successful. The nurse took a look and said, "He needs an intravenous drip. The patient has a history of asthma. Is there any medicine for allergies?" "No," Chinemo replied, not forgetting to place his hand on Bojio's forehead as though he knew it would make her feel better. When the nurse saw this scene, she really wanted to take a picture of it and send it to her boyfriend so that he could take a good look at it. When dealing with handsome people, the nurse's tone would definitely be very good. "Your bed number is 0271. Here is the doctor's prescription list. I'll go over after I'm done." Chinemo thanked her. His back view was still so captivating that people couldn't help but stare. The medical staff all gathered together. "Who is this? You're not from this district, right? Why haven't I seen you before?" "I don't know. I think he's even more handsome than a celebrity. Too good looking. It's a pity that he's already taken." It was not hard to hear the regret in his voice. Chinemo acted as if he hadn't heard anything and walked into the ward. No matter how high-end a clinic was, it wouldn't have its own ward. There were 2 beds in one ward. The bed inside was already occupied. It was a little boy who was immersed in drinking yogurt. His mother was nowhere to be found. She was lying on the bed and receiving an intravenous drip. Chinemo leaned over and placed the person in his arms on the other bed. Only then did the medical staff clearly see the face of the person he was holding. They were momentarily stunned. The face was so beautiful that it was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. Because of the fever, there was a faint flush on her cheeks. It was rare to see such a beautiful woman when she was sick. However, they could still see that she was extremely uncomfortable. Her thin lips were slightly dry and her hair was stuck to her forehead. Her brows were still furrowed. The nurse brought the medicine over for the intravenous drip. She didn't understand why such a beautiful person wouldn't cooperate with the needle. Chinemo saw it and turned his body, allowing Bojio to lean into his arms. Then he lifted the person's right hand. "Be good, you'll recover." The nurse was amazed. It wasn't her imagination. It seemed that the sick woman would only lower her guard in front of her boyfriend. However, she had been in the clinic for a long time and rarely saw such a patient boyfriend. Honestly, this was the first time she had seen such a patient. The little boy, who was also suffering from the flu, had been watching from the side. Coincidentally, his mother came in. He sat up straight and leaned over. Mom, that big brother's coaxing tone is similar to yours." The little boy's mother felt that her spoiled child was hopeless. She knew that the man beside her must have heard it. She turned her head and was about to smile apologetically. The person in his arms seemed to be very uncomfortable. She wanted to move the hand that was holding the intravenous drip. However, he held her down. His tone was calm, but it wasn't hard to hear the gentleness in it. "Are you uncomfortable? Bear with it for a while more, the infusion will be over soon." The little boy saw this and shook his head. "No, it's not the same. If I moved, you would have beaten me up." As a mother, she didn't know what to say. She coughed lightly. "Drink your yogurt." The little boy sighed. It was the same fever, but why was there such a huge difference? At first, he thought that this was already sad enough. Unexpectedly, the handsome big brother peeled a piece of candy and fed it to the patient in his arms. The little boy raised his head. "Mom, I want to eat candy too." His mother, who was accompanying him, suddenly felt helpless. Were all the young people in love like this? They were even more meticulous than her own child. Why didn't she find someone like this? Fortunately, the little boy was almost done with the infusion. It was just a short half an hour. The mother and son suffered a blow that they had never experienced before. The little boy glanced over. "Mom, I'm not a troublemaker. My dad never treated you like this when you were sick." "Your dad is a heartless." The mother paused and laughed. "So you have to be nicer to your girlfriend in the future. Be like this big brother, understand?" The little boy nodded. He didn't understand. Why was the older sister in the big brother's arms the one who was sick, but the big brother was the one with an ugly expression? The mother and son left. Only Chinemo and Bojio were left in the ward. The person in his arms hadn't woken up yet. Qin Emo didn't change his position. He held the paper cup with one hand, the rim of the cup against her lips. This was the scene that Terry, who had been by Qin Mo's side, saw when he came in with the things. When he had picked up the call, he hadn't dared to believe that it was really Boss Qin calling him. After all, he had received news that Boss Qin wouldn't be appearing in the near future and that something had happened. After hanging up, his first reaction was to inform Madame and Boss. Then he went to the location that Boss Qin had designated with a bag of candy in his hand. This was the reason why Boss Qin had called him. He knew young Master Jiu. Oh wait, it wasn't young Master Jiu but Miss Jiu who loved candy. He didn't have to think to know that Boss Qin wanted to give these candy to Miss Jiu. But even so, when he saw the scene he couldn't help but pause. After all, Boss Qin had never served anyone like this before. He seemed to be exuding a cold aura, but when he looked at the person in his arms, his gaze was filled with adoration. Boss Qin, let me do it. As a special assistant he had to be quick. Unexpectedly, before he could reach for the paper cup, the person in front of him had already taken a sip and leaned over to pass it to the person in his arms. It was as though he didn't exist in the room. Honestly, was he just a sugar bearer? When he realized that he might become a third wheel, the smart assistant placed the candy down and didn't say anything else. He closed the door and stood there, waiting for Boss Qin to buy something for him before entering. As a young man who was still single, he really didn't want to eat Boss Qin's dog food. The sky outside gradually darkened. 2 hours later, Bo Jio wanted to pull the blanket off her body due to the heat but was pressed down by a hand. It was slightly cold and comfortable. There's still half a can left, will be done soon. That voice made Bo Jio realize that she wasn't dreaming and that the blurry vision she had had in the car was real. As well as the apology he had whispered into her ear. He was really back. Bo Jio opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the person's side profile. He was wearing a dark-colored sweater, his Adam's apple moving slightly under his long neck. His jawline was glowing. It was extremely familiar. Bo Jio reached out instinctively, grabbing onto his sleeve. This was something she had often done when she was young. Qin Emo paused and lowered his eyes to look at her. His long, curly lashes fell and his eyes were deep. Seeing that she had woken up, he didn't stop. Instead, he hooked her face, leaned over and passed the water over again. Bo Jio was indeed thirsty. Before she could react, she received the kiss. The sweet warm water touched her lips, the faint fragrance of the man's arrogance passing over. It was slightly cold and soft, like touching ice cream. It melted in his mouth and tasted sweet. This was the feeling she had every time she kissed the Almighty. It was an addictive feeling. It was a pity that he wasn't kissing her, he was feeding her water. He left after a touch. Bo Jio was disappointed. Just as she was about to use her seduction skills, he opened his palm, revealing a pile of sweets. Pick one. Orange flavored. Bo Jio pointed at one of the sweets. She watched as his slender and fair hand peeled it open and fed it to her. After savoring the taste, she glanced up. Chapter 1350. MMH. Bo Jio didn't mind expressing her thoughts. I want to eat meat. Eat meat? Qin Emo laughed, his eyes bright like aged wine. We'll talk about it when you're better. Bo Jio wanted to move. Qin Emo reached out and pressed her down, turning to make a phone call. Not long after, the special assistant walked in from the outside, holding a beautiful takeaway box in his hand. What was disappointing was that they were all porridge. Bo Jio had been a carnivore since she was young. Porridge didn't feel anything. But she was indeed hungry, so she didn't care if she felt anything. Bo Jio wanted to eat by herself. His assistant was watching from the side, but Boss Qin was one step ahead, opening the takeaway box. He held the spoon in his hand, looking at Miss Jio with an arched brow. Open your mouth. Bo Jio realized that good-looking people would be a feast for the eyes when they fed others. The porridge was still hot. When it reached her mouth, the saltiness was just right and the texture was good. Bo Jio tilted her head to drink. When she was done, the 4-drip was finished. Before she could stand up, he bent over and pulled her into his arms. It's cold outside. These 3 words were spoken in a very faint voice. Bo Jio could smell the fragrance on his body. She didn't pay attention to anything else. The sound of his heartbeat was too clear. The corners of his mouth curled up as he exerted more strength with his fingers. Qin Emo glanced down at the person in his arms. Retract your face. MMH? Bo Jio didn't understand. His voice was still faint. You're too pretty, it's dazzling. When Qin Emo said this, Assistant Li turned sideways to open the door. He coughed softly and held back his laughter. When Bosch Qin fell in love, it was really hard to describe. The sky outside was dark. It was winter in Jiang City and the temperature had dropped to 0 degrees. When the wind blew over, it was exceptionally cold. But Bojiu didn't feel anything. She knew that he was blocking the wind for her. Because when they were about to enter the car, she heard his voice. Why is the temperature still a little high? The fever wouldn't subside so quickly. Even within 4 drip, it would take a night to recover. Qin Emo was an expert in psychology. He knew the basics of medicine. But for some reason, the moment he touched her warm body, he couldn't wait to lower the temperature. Bojiu felt that this wasn't bad. In the past, she had been injured and sick. Come to think of it, he had only taken care of her like this when she was young. After that, she had become the young lord of the hacker world. There were many things that he had to face by himself. Even if he had a fever, he would be fine after a good night's sleep. How could it be like today when there were people coaxing him? Bojiu tilted her head and could see his neck. It was long and fair, giving off an aura of abstinence. Cold. He probably noticed her gaze. He lowered his eyes and kissed her eyes. We'll be there soon. Bojiu felt a sweetness in her heart. Her head was still burning. She didn't know that Qin Emo was recalling his childhood memories. She just felt a sense of familiarity rising in her heart, but she couldn't put her finger on it. It was probably because he had taken good care of her. Moreover, the Almighty actually didn't bring up her dark history when he lost his memory. From this point of view, having a fever wasn't bad either. Perfect. In the end, she was still too naive. The Almighty's next sentence was, "When we arrive, I want to hear how I fell in love with you at first sight and how I pursued you." Chapter 1351. Just one sentence from the Almighty. Bojiu felt as though she had been tricked again. She really couldn't have a dark history. Especially in front of the Almighty. Most importantly, this Almighty was her boyfriend. When they were about to alight, he reached out to pinch her face, his brows arched, giving off a gentle impression. Do you think you can escape by pretending to be asleep? Bojiu opened her eyes, but before she could speak, he wrapped her up with his jacket. It would be perfect if the Almighty didn't dig up her dark history instead of taking care of her. They weren't heading back to the Qin family's house but to her apartment. Grandfather Butler's expression darkened when he saw his young lord being carried back. But as a gentleman, he poured a cup of English black tea for his assistant. The assistant was stunned when he saw the old man in front of him. When did the Fu family hire such a butler? He thought he had a good aura, wearing a suit every day and helping Bosch Qin settle all matters. If he claimed to be the second best assistant, no one would dare to do so. But this person in front of him wasn't just wearing a suit. More importantly, his clothes were spotless. Even the way he looked at his pocket watch was perfect. From the tea set to the pastry in his mouth, it was so exquisite that it shocked him. Such a beautiful thing definitely wouldn't taste good. With this thought in mind, the assistant placed a piece of pastry into his mouth casually. As a young man, he had been fed dog food for an entire day. Shouldn't he eat something to fill his stomach? How could it taste so good? The assistant's eyes widened in that instant. Looking at Grandpa Butler, who had been extremely elegant from the beginning to the end, he suddenly felt like he had lost. No wonder Bosch Qin didn't bring Miss Jo back. The assistant wasn't aware of the other reason. Qin Mo knew that with Grandfather Butler's medical skills, it would definitely be good for her. Bojiu was lying on the bed, accepting the Almighty's water. She was about to do something to distract the Almighty. It was better not to talk about how he had wooed her. Perhaps it was because of her dark history or the slight fever. Bojiu's face was slightly red. To show that she was obedient, she sat down as if she had done something to redeem herself. She drank whatever Qin Mo fed her. Even though she didn't like to drink water usually, she drank half a cup in one go. Then, she looked at the desert god as if she was asking for praise. The desert god did not react. Bojiu drank another half cup before looking up. The result was the same. Looks like I can't escape. Bojiu thought for a moment. If she didn't kiss and coax the Almighty, she would be able to get away with it. She didn't expect that before she could speak. He reached out and picked up a photo by the bedside. When he lowered his eyes, it was impossible to see any expression on his face. That picture had appeared in the castle before. Because of this photo, the cold aura emitted from the Almighty's body was still vivid in his mind. Instinctively, Bojiu reached out and took the photo. She seemed to be muttering to herself and explaining, Why is this photo here? It must be Grandpa Butler who did it. After saying that, he turned around, pulled out the drawer and put the photo into it. Now that the Almighty had gotten rid of the hypnosis, he should be rather weak. She would tell him about the photo after he calmed down. As a domineering CEO, she had to be considerate. After Bo-Gyo put the photo away, she smiled at Chin-Mo and leaned against him suavely. Chin-Mo lowered his lids and looked at her casually. He fed her another mouthful of water. It's not surprising that you did it. After all, she's your childhood sweetheart. Bo-Gyo drank the water nervously. After swallowing, she coughed lightly. It really wasn't me. This time, the Almighty had indeed wronged her. She didn't have time to set up the photo. Ever since the hypnosis had been planted on the Almighty, Bo-Gyo had been thinking of ways to make him stay. Even though the Almighty had always called her Sugar Boy, Bo-Gyo could sense the playfulness behind it. It seemed as though he would leave once he lost interest. Of course, that was just her facade. But it was this facade. Bo-Gyo couldn't even coax little Princess Chin back then. Why would she take the photo out? Grandfather Butler was different. From a medical point of view, hypnosis would usually be related to memories that people weren't willing to face. Because they weren't willing to face it, it would create a psychological weakness and seal off certain things. Hence, Grandfather Butler would try any method to evoke Chin-Mo's memory. Bo-Gyo understood this logic. But the Almighty's rejection of her, his childhood sweetheart, had been too obvious. Now that she had a dark history, she had to avoid these minefield topics. Chin-Mo could read her thoughts. He lifted his thin lips and pulled the drawer open. What? Do you think I'll be jealous? Why would you? Bo-Gyo laughed. Aren't you going to eat it? Chin-Mo replied slowly, what's there to eat? Bo-Gyo. No matter how she thought about it, he didn't mean it. It was probably another trap. Bo-Gyo didn't want to fall for it. She wanted to create a topic to trap the Almighty. She pushed the drawer back. Brother Mo, after what you said, I thought about it. I agree that my childhood sweetheart is a little scheming. For example, he never allowed me to play with others. Now that I think about it, he might have been jealous. I was young back then and didn't understand it all. After she was done, she waited for the Almighty to agree with her point of view. After all, according to the Almighty's personality, not only would he agree to it, he would also calmly advise her to stay away from such people and so on. But why was he so quiet? Bo-Gyo watched as he peeled off the packaging, his fingers pausing. She arched a brow. She was about to eat. Why did the Almighty suddenly stop? Before she could figure it out, Chin-Mo sat down. Chin-Mo sat down, his thin lips slightly curved as he asked her, do you want to eat? The Almighty was tempting her with his beauty again. Bo-Gyo waited for him to feed her. Unexpectedly, the man smiled, raised his hand slightly, and threw the candy that was originally meant for her into the trash can beside him. Bo-Gyo, since you're having a fever, eat less sweet things. Chin-Mo arched a brow. He exuded an aura of abstinence. What he said sounded very reasonable. But he had fed her a lot of candy previously. Bo-Gyo didn't know how she had offended him. She sat there in confusion. He turned and covered her with the blanket. His voice was calm. I heard that the purest feelings happen when you're young. Bo-Gyo knew he was trying to knock her down. In the end, it was because of that photo. She replied immediately, what do you know when you were young? Chin-Mo tapped her wrist. You don't want to talk about your childhood? Bo-Gyo nodded. It was mainly because you would get jealous. Chin-Mo chuckled. His slender and fair hand was still tapping her wrist. He seemed to respect her opinion. He pondered over it slowly. The light landed on his chin. Let's talk about how many people you have chased and how I fell in love with you at first sight? Bo-Gyo. This wasn't even as good as the previous topic. Bo-Gyo wilted. She leaned her head against Chin-Mo's chest, her gaze wavering. Brother Mo, my head hurts. Do you think I'll believe you? Chin-Mo smirked. Bo-Gyo didn't reply. Even with the Almighty's words, he reached out to caress her head, his voice gentle and soothing. It was easy for her to relax. If it wasn't for another sentence. Aren't you going to bring the photo? Bo-Gyo would have remained motionless. I'm not doing it anymore. It looks good. Why aren't you doing it? Chin-Mo was nonchalant. When he felt the warmth from her body, he peeled another piece of candy. It's good to reminisce about the past at the right time. Bo-Gyo didn't move. You said it so generously, I almost believed you. It's in the drawer. Bo-Gyo felt that this was a battle of wits and bravery. She didn't relax at all. It was time to give her the candy. Unexpectedly, he smiled again. The same thing happened. This time he didn't throw the candy into the bin. Instead he ate it himself. Bojo, was it so hard to eat candy nowadays? Besides, he had clearly been feeding it to her. Chinemo swept her a glance, his voice calm. Do you want to eat it? MMH, Bojo replied. What if acting pitiful worked? Reality proved that acting pitiful wasn't a good thing in front of the Almighty. Chinemo chuckled, pinching her face. Bear with it. Bojo? Her awkwardness was definitely because of the photo. Bojo's mind was a little empty from the heat. She didn't think about recovering her memory. After all, Chinemo didn't seem to have any intention of telling her. He wanted her to come back on her own. And when he found out that the scheming boy he was talking about was him, that feeling was really. Chinemo lowered his lids, pinching her face again to see how long it would take for her to come back to her senses. Bojo didn't know why he was pinching her, but the warmth in his eyes was too strong. He treated her as though she was a treasure. His eyes were half-lidded, making him look abstinent and seductive. He specialized in attacking people's hearts. The only thing she couldn't do about was seduction. Her clear eyes would naturally stare straight at him. Chinemo paused when he saw her. His gaze deepened and he bent down, intending to kiss the corner of her lips. Unexpectedly, he couldn't control himself. His fingers slid across her softness. He wanted to melt her into a puddle in his arms. Bojo felt dizzy from the kiss. Even a fever couldn't compare to the warmth the Almighty gave her. Even so, Chinemo could feel her body temperature rising. His forehead was pressed against hers. Because of her lack of energy, her heart seemed to be tied into a knot. Her blood seemed to have stopped flowing. He hugged her and in the end fed her a candy. He lowered his head and kissed her hair. Tell me when you're thirsty. Bojo didn't think the Almighty was good at taking care of people in the past. But this time it was different. Actually, even though it was just a fever, it was quite troublesome. There was no taste in her mouth. She wanted to drink water and eat something sweet and sour at the same time. But it wasn't good to eat sweets all the time. Her throat couldn't take it. It wasn't easy to make a person with a fever comfortable. However, his eyes never left her. Whenever she moved, he would know what she was going to do. The candy was replaced by fruit, and he was the one who fed her the whole time. She didn't even need to go to the washroom. Bojo's hands were weak, but she didn't need the drip anymore. He didn't listen to her. He bent down and carried her into the washroom. He even helped her untie the belt of her pajamas. The back of the Almighty's hands was very white. His fingertips seemed to be glowing. It was a sign of his temperament. When he brushed past her, Bojo always felt that it was strange for his hands to untie her pants. But from this angle he didn't seem to mind at all. Call me when you're done. It was probably because he was taking care of her meticulously. Under the Almighty's supervision, Bojo drank many cups of water in one go. At around 10 p.m., Bojo's body temperature had returned to normal. Bojo's body temperature returned to normal. She closed her eyes and fell asleep in his arms. Unlike her, Chinemo didn't sleep. He hugged her with one hand and used the other to check her temperature from time to time. A fever was most afraid of relapses in the night. Everyone knew that. Chinemo didn't fall asleep immediately. His fingers caressed her cheeks and pushed the hair away. The gentleness in his eyes was bottomless. It seemed like it was about to spill out. But Bojo, who was already asleep, didn't see it. Otherwise, she would have felt that the look in his eyes was very familiar. Grandpa Butler stood outside the door. He had prepared the soup and wanted to come in, but when he saw this scene, he silently closed the door and looked at the silver pocket watch. He was clear that even without him, young Lord would recover very well today. Because the best medicine was meticulous care. In this aspect, no one could compare to the young master of the Qin family. Bojo slept comfortably. She couldn't help but rub her face against the warm cotton. She didn't know it wasn't a pillow but the sleeping shirt Chinemo was wearing. The moment she moved, Chinemo would open his eyes and look at her to check her temperature. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He pinched her face. I've given you so many hints but you still haven't guessed the answer. Little Bojo, it isn't wrong to call you an idiot. Bojo seemed to be dreaming of something good. Her lips were still half raised. Her mouth was slightly open and there was moisture coming out. Chinmo's gaze deepened. He turned sideways and placed the photo back in its original position. The night sky was getting darker. The netizens weren't sure what was going on. Their focus was on the competition. After the match between Supreme Alliance and Theo, they saw hope. At the same time, they realized that Supreme Alliance wasn't as good as the Japanese. Chapter 1352. After the match between Supreme Alliance and Theo, they saw hope. At the same time, they realized that Supreme Alliance's standards weren't as good as the Japanese. Many analysis posts were published, the gist of which was that the chances of Supreme Alliance losing were too high. It wasn't because Supreme Alliance wasn't good, but because the Japanese were too capable. Putting Yushin aside, Hoshino's skills were world-class. They weren't just members of the Japanese. They were chosen by the Japanese to represent them in the international competition every year. Moreover, Supreme Alliance's strength didn't only come from their individual skills, more importantly, it came from their own fan base. Any one of them could start a conversation. It wasn't just limited to China. A long time ago, Lin Qintao had mentioned that Hoshino was his idol. His influence was evident since he was the idol of professional gamers. Supreme Alliance versus the Japanese. In China, there wasn't much of a difference. But in the international esports scene, the name Supreme Alliance hadn't appeared in the past 3 years. The foreign media had flipped through Supreme Alliance's competition history. Such a team wasn't eye-catching, except for the most valuable esports player. But it had been 3 years since Qin Mo had been sealed. From the foreign media's point of view, Supreme Alliance hadn't been outstanding for the past 3 years. Did that mean Qin Mo's strength had weakened? After all, in China, many esports players would start a live stream after becoming a professional esports player. The huge influx of fans seemed to have made them forget their original intentions. In the end, they could still do live streams but not professional esports. It was simple, the money earned from a professional esport wasn't as fast as a live stream. Besides, the fans would sometimes have fantasies about them, sending countless girls to their doorsteps. Hence, in the eyes of the foreign media, Supreme Alliance was already in the same state. After all, the team's looks made people feel that they should be celebrities. Moreover, it was Qin Mo. Many people said that if you were ugly, people would subconsciously identify you. Similarly, handsome people could do it too. It was just that their positions were different. The greater the discussion, the greater the pressure on Supreme Alliance. On the other hand, since they were professionals, they had to bear this pressure. The internet cafe was still lit, but it wasn't open. Yin Weiyao had a cigarette in his mouth. Just as he was about to go to bed, he heard someone knocking on the door. He pulled the iron door open and saw 3 people standing in a row outside. Shui Yaoyao, Coco and Feng Shang. Perhaps it was because it was almost the holidays, the atmosphere outside was especially strong. The atmosphere of Christmas was everywhere, and it was snowing. The 3 of them always looked very young when they wore their combat uniforms on the outside and cotton-padded clothes on the inside. But Yin Weiyao thought for a moment. These 3 weren't that old, the oldest was only 19 years old. Come in. Yin Weiyao was still holding a box of instant noodles in his hand. Now that he saw 3 more people, he turned around and asked, "Do you want to eat?" The 3 of them nodded and followed behind Yin Weiyao, like children following their parents. As Yin Weiyao cooked instant noodles with a cigarette in his mouth, he wondered if he had become a mother ahead of time. One of the benefits of internet cafes was the abundance of snacks. The 3 of them didn't train today. Other than Coco, their faces were now recognizable. Even when they walked over, they wore masks and were now sitting in the private room. The private room was huge. The 3 of them sat, hugging a huge pile of snacks and watching Slam Dunk. Unlike the National League, they didn't play like their lives depended on it. They didn't watch the Japanese's tactics. There were so many classic images of the Japanese, they could imagine it even with their eyes closed. If there was a god in every field, the Japanese were undoubtedly the god of esports. Logic told them that they should relax and face the competition the next day. But they couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. It seemed like there were times when one would have such a feeling. When you were an ordinary person, you wanted to live a little more. When you weren't ordinary anymore, you could walk on the streets and see people discussing the holidays as they pleased. But when you could only wear a mask and walk through the dazzling array of shops, you would always be envious of others. The loneliness in your heart didn't seem to have found peace. Even the uneasiness wasn't something anyone could understand. Because they could feel their standards dropping, they couldn't help but walk here. Coco had thought that he would be alone, but the moment he turned the corner, he saw little Stutterer tying his shoelaces and Yao Yao waving at them. They didn't plan to meet each other, it was just a chance encounter. It seemed like everyone was the same, only then could they feel at ease. They knew what they were afraid of. They were afraid that they would lose the competition when their captain wasn't around. They were afraid that they would drag the entire team down because of their poor positioning. They didn't need anyone to tell them, they were clear about these problems. They were even afraid of these things, worried about them. After all, Little Spade had been in a bad state after the competition. Even now, her phone hadn't been switched on. The discussions online continued. They couldn't satisfy everyone. Even if they were sick, there would still be people who would find fault with them. Yin Weiyao had been in the industry for a long time. He knew what they were thinking when he came out with the noodles. He used his chopsticks to knock on the side of the pot. Bring the bowls. Why does the noodles feel a little hard? Coco was the first to eat. Feng Shang took a sip of the soup. There's something to eat, that's good enough. He accepted the explanation. Yin Weiyao was a rough uncle. He usually boiled his noodles, but when he saw the three of them, he turned on the fire. He arched a brow and took a bite. Realizing that it wasn't delicious yet, he stopped eating. He lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth, smiling faintly. I say, I'm an old man, I don't worry so much. You guys are so young, why are you thinking so much? Even if you lose, you will still have a chance in the future. Coco paused, not saying a word. Yin Weiyao patted his shoulder. Don't give yourself too much pressure, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Don't worry about making mistakes, these things are normal in the competition. It wasn't clear if Yin Weiyao's words were effective or if it was because of the hunger. It was easier to resist. After finishing the noodles, the three of them found their own beds and sofas, lying down and falling asleep. Yin Weiyao glanced at it and brought 2 blankets over without batting an eyelid. One covered Coco and Feng Shang, while the other covered Shui Yaoyao. Then he turned his head, turning off the lights in the room. In the darkness, he didn't go to sleep, instead he turned his head and lit another cigarette. Then he took out his phone, sending Feng Yi a message. They're all asleep, they've thought it through now, but I don't know what will happen tomorrow. When Feng Yi saw the message, he raised his hand and loosened the collar of his shirt. He lifted his head and looked at the city lights outside the window. That's right, what should I do tomorrow? He wasn't the only one thinking about this. With both hands in his pockets, Lin Feng, who was wearing a long black down jacket, was also thinking about this question after walking 3 streets. He was probably so focused that he didn't even notice the glass door in front of him. With a loud bang he crashed into it. Lin Feng said in pain, "Ah." The most awkward thing wasn't being seen by strangers. It was being seen by the people he was most familiar with. It was accompanied by light laughter from the girls. What else could Lin Feng do? He had an expression that said, I know you're laughing at me. Unfortunately, he was wearing a mask, the expression couldn't be conveyed. But when he glanced sideways, he met a pair of eyes. That person didn't ask if it was painful, raising his hand, brushing aside the hair in front of his forehead, his fingertips rubbing the reddened area. He didn't need to think to know that the other party must have seen the scene just now. What are you thinking about without looking at the road? Yunhu's voice was calm. Lin Feng coughed and avoided the topic. He also avoided his hand. Why are you here? Yunhu didn't intend to hide his tracks. I followed you all the way. When Lin Feng heard this, he felt a little uncomfortable. She heard him say, I've seen enough stupid things. Lin Feng opened his mouth, wanting to start a war. Let's find a place to talk. Yunhu looked serious. I'm under a lot of pressure. When Lin Feng heard this, his attitude changed instantly, placing his hand on Yunhu's shoulder. Come, tell me what's bothering you. Ever since he was young, he had always been troubled by a lot of things. Yunhu was someone else's child. Pressure? What a joke. He had never experienced it before. Moreover, he had never experienced any major setbacks, other than the ones they had experienced together. It was all because he was obvious. On the other hand, Yunhu really couldn't see anything. When Lin Feng was young, he wanted to be a caring brother, but he never had the chance because Yunhu was outstanding. There wasn't any pressure at all. Even during the few days before and after the college entrance examination, he still ran on time. It was as though nothing could affect him. Now, it was finally Yunhu's turn to need his guidance. It was a dream come true. Lin Feng walked to the side with Yunhu, pleased with himself. Yunhu glanced sideways at the hand on his shoulder. He smiled. This guy didn't seem to realize that there was a difference between a straight and a straight person. The two of them were at the largest commercial square in Jiang City. This square was originally very fashionable. In addition to the geographical location, there were many people even at night. There were balloon sellers, guitars, and some young rollerblading kids. Perhaps it was because Yunhu's height was too eye-catching. Even though both of them were wearing masks, their tall and slender figures attracted many girls. Lin Feng didn't realize that the gazes were directed at them. He brought Yunhu to sit on the long bench in the square, looking at the pile of balloons not far away. What kind of pressure is it? Are you afraid you won't perform well tomorrow? Yunhu replied faintly, his long legs crossed. He didn't look like he was under pressure, as though he was just finding an excuse to stay with this person. The atmosphere was especially festive. They could vaguely hear the music from the coffee shop. It was Eason Chen's voice, singing, "Christmas Knot." "I completely understand what you're thinking." Lin Feng seemed to be very experienced, sighing deeply, starting to imitate Yunhu's posture. He sat like that, relaxed, but his hands were a little cold. But this didn't affect his interest in being a caring brother. "As long as you wait for me?" Yunhu spoke before he could. "I'll go buy a cup of coffee." Lin Feng agreed with this point. Being a caring brother meant drinking coffee, that would make it seem more formal. There was a coffee shop nearby. It sold quickly. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that after Yunhu brought 2 cups of hot coffee out, Lin Feng sat on the long bench, watching the heat in his hands. When he reached out to take it, he heard a sentence from the side. "Look at how good my boyfriend is. He's a guy, he knows it's cold, he's buying a cup of coffee, but you don't know how to buy it for me." Lin Feng, boyfriend, a guy, buying coffee for him, one could imagine what his expression was like. Yunhu was very natural. "Help me." "Oh." Lin Feng thought to himself, the girl who just walked over was definitely a fujoshi. A fujoshi would look at anyone, but this had nothing to do with him. Unexpectedly, before he could take the coffee, another voice floated over. "How oppressive. It's fine if you wear couple outfits out, but you're actually sitting outside drinking coffee." "Wearing couple outfits?" Lin Feng tilted his head, glancing at the long black down jacket on Yunhu. Girl down jackets for boys are all the same. Take a closer look, there is a difference. How can this be a couple outfit? Awkward. Even the naive Lin Feng felt awkward. It showed how many people were watching. He couldn't drink this coffee no matter what. After all, he had to remove his mask to drink coffee. If he and Yunhu removed their masks, by then who knew what kind of topic it would bring. Hence, Lin Feng didn't think much. He stood up with the steaming hot coffee between them. "Let's go, we'll talk when we get back." That was his original plan, but who knew that he might have stood up too abruptly. The cup of coffee in his hand slanted to the side, scalding him and throwing it out. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who didn't expect this. Even Yunhu hadn't expected it. There were coffee stains on his pants. Because he was usually too neat, he seemed slightly disheveled. From that angle, it seemed as though Lin Feng was worried about what others would think. He wanted to reject Yunhu's coffee but didn't know how to. A sense of alienation suddenly burst forth. Chapter 1353. Lin Feng sensed it too. He opened his mouth, wanting to explain. "That I'm not, image." Yunhu interrupted him as though he didn't care. "I know." Lin Feng watched the back view in front of him. "Do you want to wipe your pants first? I'll wash it when I get home." Yunhu held onto the coffee cup, his eyes half-lidded, seemingly nonchalant. Lin Feng felt that his brain wasn't working properly. He could indeed wash it when he got home. "I'll call a cab." Lin Feng wanted to make it up to him, but he didn't expect that there wouldn't be any cabs nearby, probably due to the festival. The taxi queues in front of the commercial plaza were also in short supply. Yunhu stood there and could clearly see the steam rising from the coffee cup. He tilted his head to look at the person beside him who was still tapping on his phone. The snowflakes fell on his fingers, melting bit by bit. It was cold just looking at him. Yunhu paused, taking a step forward, passing the coffee cup in his hand over. "It'll be quick, Lin Feng didn't understand. What did he mean? But this time he held it firmly, not spilling it out. Yunhu took out his phone. "I'll call a cab, hold the cup, it can warm your hands." It was too polite to thank him. Lin Feng could only take the cup, using the moment he removed his mask to secretly take a sip. Unexpectedly, there was another voice coming from the other side. "Two people drinking from the same cup, it's an indirect kiss." Little Show just doesn't seem to agree, but he actually likes it. How awkward the cute zero is. Lin Feng almost spat out his coffee. "Cute zero? F***CK girl, take a closer look at my face. Even if I'm gay, I should be a one. Okay. Lin Feng told himself to calm down. Removing his mask would definitely expose his identity. Yunhu swept him a glance. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Sometimes Lin Feng envied people with poor hearing. Yunhu kept his phone, his long fingers moving. "There's no car, let's go another round." "Sure, let's go." Lin Feng didn't know that there wasn't a car up there, but Yunhu didn't call for them, hoping that they could stay like this for a while longer. After all, it was a festival. It was a festival that only couples would celebrate together. Lin Feng didn't think much of it. After all, it would be better if he didn't sit on the bench. Moreover, he wouldn't be able to sleep if he went home now. This time, compared to before, it was much more ordinary. There was music floating in the square, and many people were taking pictures with peach hearts that were emitting light. During such festivals, the square would always have many shaped lights. Just looking at it made people feel like they were full of young girls. Lin Feng didn't really understand what a girl's heart was. However, seeing so many girls taking photos for a straight man like him, it was also a beautiful scenery. If it wasn't for Yunhu's sudden question, "Do you care a lot about people calling you Zero?" "Nonsense, I'm just." Lin Feng paused for a moment. So this guy had heard him. Yunhu stuffed his hands into his pockets. "It's not your problem. Anyone who is with me will be the one down there." Lin Feng chuckled. "Brother, your ability to boast has improved a lot." Yunhu leaned forward. "Isn't it?" Lin Feng looked at the pair of eyes that were suddenly so close to him. For some reason his heart tightened. He tilted his head. "You can talk if you want, but you're so close. You're scaring me." "Even this can scare you." Yunhu straightened and spoke slowly. "When did you become so timid? Or are you worried about other people's words? You should indeed maintain a distance from me in the future. Let's go, the car is here." When Lin Feng heard that, he felt that he couldn't explain himself. Very quickly, Yunhu raised his arm and placed it on his shoulder. He hugged his neck like a good brother. "I'm joking. Let's go, the car is really here." Just like that, Lin Feng allowed Yunhu to mess around. He didn't have the mood to think about how to win against the Japanese tomorrow. His mind was filled with thoughts. Was there really something wrong with his way of doing things? Did he make Yunhu think that he would mind his sexual orientation? Hence, when Lin Feng reached home, he kept trying to make himself look warmer. Yunhu saw it in his eyes. To deal with this guy, he had to be harsh with his words. He threw the pants into the washing machine. When he turned, he could see his face. Yunhu originally thought that after today's incident, he would definitely stay and sleep with him to show that he was still close to him. Who knew that it would be different from before? When he saw him walk out, he placed the cup in his hand down. "It's getting late. Sleep early. You don't have to be so stressed. You played so well, I should be the one feeling stressed. Alright, I'm going to sleep." Lin Feng stretched as he spoke. "See you tomorrow." "You?" Yunhu almost blurted out. "Were you sleeping here?" When he saw Lin Feng looking at him in confusion, he changed his tone. "Remember to pick up everything. Don't forget the wrist guard." I know. Lin Feng waved his hand as he walked out. When the door closed, Yunhu could still hear his mother's voice. Yunhu could vaguely hear his mother's voice. Isn't little Feng sleeping here today?" "No, it's not convenient." "Tomorrow?" The voice at the back couldn't be heard clearly. It was probably because he had reached the entrance. Yunhu looked at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. He wore the same down jacket. Even passers-by noticed it. In his eyes, it was just an imagination. This guy's nerves were getting thicker and thicker. But there were still changes. They were very subtle. So subtle that he didn't want to think about it. It wasn't convenient for him to stay the night. What exactly was he thinking? Yunhu leaned his head against the window. Outside, the lights were bright and dazzling. It seemed that with that person around, the pressure would be greatly reduced. The Japanese were indeed too strong. They were so strong that he was worried that that person would return to his state after the competition. Even if it wasn't his fault, he would habitually look for the reason on himself. That thick-skinned person wasn't slow at all in certain aspects. Time trickled by slowly. The sky started to brighten from the east. In the largest building in Jiang City, the staff had already started to enter the arena. Their busy schedule showed how much importance the country and abroad placed on the finals. An hour later, the foreign media translator arrived. His aura was strong and attracted many people's attention. The Chinese side had been guessing what could have attracted so many foreign media from so many places. They wanted to interview them. The media was good with their words. Of course, they wouldn't express that they didn't care about Supreme Alliance. They just smiled. Everyone knows the Japanese's ability. Their competition will definitely be exciting. I believe the others are here for the same reason. It sounded tactful, but upon closer inspection, it couldn't be more direct. They hadn't mentioned Supreme Alliance throughout. They would only speak when asked. Supreme Alliance, I haven't seen their competition, but since they are representing China, they should be great. It was a perfunctory response from adults. It was obvious from their expressions that they hadn't even heard of Supreme Alliance. Of course, some of the media had done some research before, but that was all. There weren't many who were interested in Supreme Alliance. When they were asked, "Which team do you think will win?" they laughed. "I think the answer is obvious. Anyone who can compete with Hoshino and Yucixin will learn a lot from this competition. Perhaps Supreme Alliance is strong, but these two international players are hard to surpass. With them, the Japanese will definitely win." The words weren't pleasant to hear. But it was undeniable that they were objective. Hoshino and Yucixin, these two names were sought after by many esports fans regardless of their nationality. They were idols for many people. Hence, it would be difficult for Supreme Alliance to win. After all, the competition between Xiangnan and the Japanese was still fresh in their minds. That year, Yucixin hadn't even participated in the Asian Cup. Just Hoshino alone was enough to defeat the Xiangnan team. During the National League, Supreme Alliance and Xiangnan had been evenly matched. It had been difficult for them to even win. With such a comparison, the difference was obvious. Moreover, Supreme Alliance was lacking Qin Mo. The netizens were also complaining. It seemed like some people were indeed like that. Whenever there was a domestic competition with an overseas team, they would always feel that the overseas team was better. There were also some who didn't know anything and started scolding. For example, "Don't come to our competition if you are so capable." Some even said, "If Supreme Alliance doesn't win, it will be a disgrace to the Chinese." It was easy to say, but these people didn't seem to consider that no one had the responsibility to win. Fortunately, all the players had disconnected from the internet. When she picked up her phone, it wasn't because she didn't want to look but because she knew it would only worsen her mood. Indeed, there were many supporters. There were many heartwarming words too. But with the competition ahead, there was a formless pressure. Hence, even though she had been burning for an entire night, there was still a string called time hanging in her heart. She opened her eyes before it was 8 p.m. Once she realized where she was, she glanced up and saw the handsome face inches away from her. It was probably because he had to take care of her last night that he didn't even take off his jacket. His black trench coat was half open, and the fur around the collar was stuck to the pillow. Her face was right on his chest, and she could see the sunlight shining on the bridge of his nose. Perhaps because the halo was too strong, even his eyelashes were a shade darker than before. Like a crow's wings, they cast a soft shadow on his elegant and handsome face, making him look especially clean. Bojio wanted to get up, but the moment she moved, he woke up. Chapter 1354. Perhaps because the halo was too strong, even his eyelashes were a shade darker than before. Like a crow's wings, they cast a soft shadow on his elegant and handsome face, making him look especially clean. Bojio wanted to get up, but the moment she moved, he woke up. He frowned slightly. The Almighty had always been in a bad mood when he woke up, but he didn't seem to be in a bad mood today. Instead, he grabbed her wrist with one hand and pulled her closer to him, pressing his forehead against hers. His long eyelashes were right in front of him, measuring her body temperature in the most primitive way. Satisfied, he relaxed his brows, his voice still carrying the laziness of a person who had just woken up. "You're recovering well." When he said this, his breath landed on her face, even the tip of their noses touching. His heart inexplicably skipped a beat. She wanted to kiss him, but he didn't let her. He arched a brow, avoiding her. Trying to do something naughty again? "A good morning kiss," Bojio replied innocently. Chinamo smiled. "I don't need it." Bojio. Was dating the Almighty so unromantic? Indeed, it wasn't romantic at all. The moment she opened her eyes, he brought her a cup of medicine. Bojio didn't like medicine, so she poured half of it. The awkward thing was that the Almighty, who had just finished washing up, caught her in the act. "Seems like you have a problem with the medicine I brewed for you," Chinamo said nonchalantly. "There's a competition later, and after drinking the medicine, you'll feel sleepy." Bojio replied righteously. "I'll feel sleepy when I have a fever," Chinamo replied, tapping the bottom of her cup with his finger. The Almighty had this aura. If you didn't listen to him, it would seem like you were being unreasonable. Bojio tilted her head up and finished the rest of the cup. The root wasn't bitter, but she couldn't stand the taste. She wanted to rinse her mouth. The moment she placed the cup down, he leaned over and kissed the corner of her lips. It wasn't an expected kiss. Bojio's hand stilled as he smiled. "Not bad, you're a good girl." That was. Little Bojio lifted her thin lips after being praised. She couldn't suppress her happiness. However, for some reason, there was an indescribable sense of familiarity. Even as she brushed her teeth, she couldn't help but feel confused. Because they were going to the competition, their clothes were very simple. The black and white uniform wasn't complicated, but when Bojio wore it, there was an indescribable tension. Today she was not wearing a dress. Because everything that needed to be proven had already been proven. He looked like a handsome young man who had walked out of a manga. The black diamond earring on his left ear was sparkling. When she walked out, she saw that person standing in front of the dressing mirror, tilting his head to tidy up his sleeves. His slender and fair fingers were beautiful. It was as if just this action alone could remind her of the way he played games. Time and time again he amazed everyone and created impossible records again and again. The almighty's skin was really good. The white porcelain always gave people a cold feeling that was difficult to approach. Abstinence's aura had never weakened since he put on the battle uniform. Behind him, the word Supreme Alliance floated. It was just like the first time they met, when he stood at the highest point. That was right. Bojio told herself. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.